A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available, thank you. So, hello, very warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to another session of Environment, where today we shall be moving ahead with the portion of water and land pollution that we basically were looking into, the chapter of water and land pollution. And we were taking a look at the various different government initiatives which have been brought about to target the portion of water pollution, in particular the freshwater pollution, and that too, to be specific, river pollution. Because when we talk about basically the aspect of water pollution, we have also seen the distribution of water, the proportion in which water is distributed when it comes to the salt water, which represents close to 97.5% of the overall total water present on the planet's surface. Only 2.5% consists of the fresh water. And even that fresh water, be it in the underground level, be it on the surface level, has ended up being significantly polluted. Now, we have taken a look at the government legislation in the sense of the Water Act 1974. And that Water Act of 1974 was, in fact, one of the first legislations that India brought in order to combat or tackle any form of environmental threat, per se pollution, climate change, or any of that. So that Water Act of 1974, hence, is quite remarkable, is quite significant. That Water Act of 1974 brings about the setting up of CPCB, the Central Pollution Control Board. And that CPCB, along with the state government, can issue directives to the various different organizations, the industries, and CPCB, whose power has been strengthened furthermore with the later amendments of 1988 as well, with the Environment Act 1986 as well. Now, CPCB has been provided with the power to search any premise of industries, etc., in order to seek for any kind of violation which has happened thereby. And in case a violation is found to be present, then the action taken by the CPCB could be closing down of the industry, shutting down of the electricity, water supply, and so on. So when it comes to the water pollution which is caused, so these events or these particular measures have the potential to tackle the portion or the problem of water pollution. Now, when we talk about the government initiatives in terms of the river cleaning and in terms of the river water, now river water in our country is quite polluted, and again, for that you don't need me to tell you this particular fact that the river water is polluted. In fact, river water in our country is something which looks clean only on the images and the diagrams and the pictures, but there has been a substantial amount of pollutant contamination which is fed into the river water quite significantly on a regular basis. And that contamination is carried out with the help of the industrial discharge, with the help of the untreated wastewater and sewage. Due to all these processes, the level of contamination keeps on going higher up and up. Now, here, when we talk about the major rivers, amongst the major rivers, one of the most prolific one, which is one of the most high profile ones, and which also represents, in a way, became the poster child of India's polluted river, has been River Ganga. River Ganga, for a long period of time, had been identified as one of those poster childs of Indian rivers. That, look, this is what Indian rivers are like. This is how polluted Indian rivers are like. But that was not always the case. This is something which has been a very recent phenomena of the past 100 years, 50 to 100 years or so. Now, here, in the case of, for example, when we consider River Ganga, now River Ganga is one of those large rivers which supports a very high amount of population around it. And it is the untreated fecal matter, untreated sewage, wastewater, etc., that ends up contributing quite significantly to the pollution load of the river. To add on to the fact that you have many of the small scale industries which have also contaminated the river in the long run, along with the agricultural waste. But it is that untreated fecal matter which had basically contaminated the river for a very, very long period of time. That is why the government in the 80s that started the plan or initiated the plan to clean up River Ganga. And that was the Ganga Action Plan, which was initiated way back in 1986 by the ex Prime Minister, that is Rajiv Gandhi. And at that point of time, when you had the Rajiv Gandhi government, at that point of time, the Ganga Action Plan was launched. Now, you have the Ganga Action Plan, that is, we will clean the river. This is an action plan to clean the particular river. Now, the river is getting polluted by what? River is getting polluted by the in those days, or around, if you think about 1986. Now, yes, you had industrial effluent and industrial emissions and discharges happening in certain areas, but in rest of the River Ganga, you had the open defecation which was taking place, which was also polluting the river. So that is why simultaneously in 1986, the Rajiv Gandhi government at that point of time also launched another program. And that program was to tackle with that open defecation. And that program was the one which we refer to as, now it is not known by that name anymore, but that program was the total sanitation campaign. This total sanitation campaign was also launched way back in 1986. And you have to see the confluence of these schemes. Now, while you are taking care that there is no sewage which is discharged or fecal matter which is discharged into the River Ganga, at the same time, you are ensuring that basically we have to clean the river at the point itself. Now, that total sanitation campaign obviously was not a great success at that point of time. It has morphed various into various names, into various different forms. And in fact, even today, one form or one of the changed form of this program is still running, and is running quite successfully for that matter. Now, can you think about the name of that scheme which is being run even today, which was initiated way back during the Rajiv Gandhi government as the Total Sanitation Campaign? Can we think about the government scheme's name? Very good. Aniket, Ilyas, Sneha, Kirubagar. Good. That Total Sanitation Campaign basically has morphed into the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. It became Nirmal Bharat eventually, then eventually it became the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So think about it, that process of cleanliness, of getting the open defecation free, that process was initiated so long back. But there have been a lot of executional challenges. Executional challenges in the sense that there has never been an open conversation up till very recently, and you have to admit that particular fact, that an open conversation is required whenever you want to change the mindset of the society. Someone needs to call out that particular belief system which still thinks, in many of the cases it is fine to understand that many of the households, they were absolutely deprived of the existence of toilets themselves, absolute absence of sewage lines themselves. But then in significant portion of the country, especially the hinterland, now it was a belief that for the and there was a kind of a reluctance to have the toilet in their house as well itself and use it there. That is on the topic on which you have a movie also which has been made. So that has been a significant reservation in the minds of large number of people. Now, it is where nowadays you have various different villages, towns, etc., who are declaring themselves open defecation free. While the argument can be kept that yes, 100% ODF is not there, maybe 90% is there, 10% still needs to be achieved. Okay, 85% is not there, 15, but still substantial portion has been covered. So the amount of fecal matter over a period of 40 years and so has reduced. The fecal matter load has started indicating a decline. So that is what yesterday also we were talking about, if you recall, that majority of the aspect of pollution, that pollution will go away if, for example, if you have the basic provision of every house being connected with a sewage line, every house getting a clean drinking water through tap, just ensure availability of clean drinking fuel in the form of cooking gas, and availability of electricity, so no requirement of burning of oil lamps, etc. So if you ensure the basic necessities of life to the larger section of the population, automatically the problem of pollution goes away. That is why next week when we study about the entire principle of sustainable development, you will find that economic development is very important in order to achieve sustainable development across the globe. And this is a larger topic that I want you to put your mind upon. After the session, I want you to think upon this. I want you to actually summarize, or in a way arrange your thoughts in the process and validate it with the help of the examples as well. Across the country, across the entirety of the world, you will find greatest amount of environmental degradation does happen, indeed is happening, in areas where the economic and social development indicators, they are very poor. That is where the population feels the urge to exploit the natural resources, because that is the only thing that is there in their control. They don't have the economic factors under their control. So once you bring about some level of economic prosperity, the level of pollution, the level of environmental degradation, all of that automatically starts tinkling down. Now, nonetheless, this Ganga Action Plan was initiated way back in 1986. Now, here also, think about the comprehensiveness of the government policies and how efficiently the government functions. Now, think about it, that you have launched a plan in 1986 that I will clean river Ganga. It takes you 5 full years, 5 full years to realize that you also need to clean the tributaries in order to have the cleaner river. Because if you think about it logically, it is a kind of a natural follow up that if you want to clean a particular river, get the tributaries also cleaner. Yamuna, from which moves through the region of Delhi, is hardly an example of a cleaner river that you can cite to anyone. Yamuna, in fact, is one of the most polluted rivers out there. So, in 1991, the action plan also was expanded to include the rivers of Yamuna, Gomti, and Damodar. Now, across River Gomti, which major city of the country lies across River Gomti? Let me see. Are we aware of that? Across Yamuna, I hope we are aware. Across Gomti, you have Lucknow. Very good. Now, Yamuna is quite significantly polluted from the urban municipal waste, as well as significant amount of industrial waste and untreated sewage. Now, that ends up polluting the river Ganga as well. Same is the case with River Gomti. River Gomti, in fact, consists of the untreated sewage as well as significant amount of the uh, agricultural waste, which is generated through the in the floodplains and the farmlands of the region of Uttar Pradesh. When we talk about River Damodar moves through a rift valley in the region of Chota Nagpur Plateau, and it is a tributary of which river? River Damodar is a tributary of which river? Damodar is not called sorrow of Odisha. Damodar is called as sorrow of Bengal. The river Mahanadi used to be referred to as sorrow of Odisha. Okay. So this is a tributary of Mahanadi. Absolutely not. Tributary of river Hooghly. Okay. So Damodar is a tributary of river Hooghly, and Damodar moves through the mineral-rich area in Chota Nagpur Plateau, and that is where river Damodar has got significant amount of mining waste associated with it. A lot of mining waste is associated with that particular river. So that is how the plan was expanded in 1991. Now, when you move to 1995, now in this case, it was by this point of time, 10 years had passed since the launch of the program or the Ganga Action Plan. So, in that span of 10 years, it was understood, it was identified that this needs to be sharpened, and you need a kind of a special purpose vehicle of sorts or a special designated program of sorts with certain objectives in order to clean the river. So in 1995, National River Conservation Plan was launched. And this included a set of objectives about what needs to be done, about how the flow of the river needs to be maintained, and it was the river conservation, that is protection of the river. So it was identified that river is under threat from the human activities, and it needs to be conserved, it needs to be protected. So how do you achieve that? You achieve that by ensuring that the pollutant load is less. You achieve that by ensuring that the flow of the river is unhindered and undisturbed. So that is how the plan was actually framed. Okay. Now, here, then again in 2009, the National Ganga River Basin Authority was constituted as per the provisions of the Environment Act 1986 to strengthen the National River Conservation Plan, to give weight, so that now you have one particular organization, one particular apex body, which will take a look at the entire maintenance and the cleanliness of the river. Now, here, then after that, when we talk about National Mission for Clean Ganga, this was established in 2011. And this mission for Clean Ganga basically was launched in order to have again a sharpened focus. So think about it. The process has been changing names ever since its inception, and not much has been achieved on the ground. So whether you call it by any other name, eventually the result has not been substantially different at all. However, when we talk about the objectives of the national mission of clean Ganga, understand the objectives. The objectives you don't need to learn, but if you understand, you will be able to reproduce them on your own itself. So that the what is the objective for National Mission for Clean Ganga? That means you need a cleaner river. So for a cleaner river, what needs to be done? Let's take a look at that. Rehabilitation and boosting the existing STPs. STPs here refer to the sewage treatment plant, and instant short-term steps to curb pollution at exit points on the riverfront in order to check the inflow of sewage, right? So sewage and controlling the flow of sewage into the river water, that is one of the primary agendas. Okay, to maintain the continuity of water flow without changing the natural seasonal variation. Maintain the continuity of water flow. Okay. Now, to restore and maintain the surface flow and groundwater. Now, when we talk about the water flow, the flow of water that you have in the river is very essential for the maintenance of the aquatic ecosystem that you have in the case of the river. Now, when you have a river water which is moving, you have to understand that it does carry some amount of sediments along with it, some amount of nutrients along with it, and that flowing water also, through the help of the air water interface, gets in a way gets embedded with dissolved oxygen, and that dissolved oxygen starts coming in, starts getting ingrained into the river water. Now, as that river water then further moves, that brings about the existence of life and the further thriving of life in the entirety of the river course. But due to pollution, but due to human action, that flow is restricted. That speed of flow, that is inhibited. And it is under those circumstances and under those conditions where you observe eutrophication to be happening. When the water is not flowing anymore, eutrophication can happen. Or in itself, when the water lies stagnant or its flow is reduced, that is particularly harmful for many species of fishes who travel upstream in order to get access to perfect breeding grounds and so on. So the normal flow, the natural flow of the river water, that is what is referred to as ecological flow. Ecological flow, or what we refer to as e-flow. Now, that e-flow is very much essential for the survivability of the river and the various different types of habitat that you find in the river system. To regenerate and maintain the natural vegetation of the area, okay, now natural vegetation, if you have in significant proportion, many of the times that also acts as a filter. It does not allow the heavy contaminants to directly drain into the river water during runoff. So that is why natural vegetation across the river banks, whenever it is there, wherever it is there, the river automatically becomes much more cleaner, because the larger particle debris, etc., they get trapped at the river banks along the roots of the various plants that you observe, to conserve and regenerate the aquatic biodiversity as well as the riparian biodiversity of the river Ganga. So whatever type of biodiversity that you have to protect that. And most importantly, participation of the public in the process of protection, rejuvenation, and management of the river. Whenever you launch any program, any kind of scheme, now, once you ensure the public participation, or unless and until you ensure public participation, that is never going to be successful, because it is the people's movement and the mass level of awareness which, in a way, becomes your chief weapon in order to achieve the completion of any program or any particular scheme. So, these were the basic missions of the National Mission for Clean Ganga. Now, eventually, National Ganga Council was created in 2016, and eventually you also had the Namami Gange program, which was launched with a kind of a similar objective setting. Okay, STP here, the full form of STP is sewage treatment plant. Okay, that is the full form of it. Now, the National Ganga Council, this was formed when? 2016. Okay. So this is, the full name is National Council for Rejuvenation, Protection and Management of River Ganga. Now, it was formed under the River Ganga Authorities Order 2016. So, in a way, it is not a statutory body, not a statutory. Statutory body means any organization or body which has been established as per the statute of the land, or as per the law of the land, right? So wherever you have any particular body or organization which has been, I understand it is uh, in the portion of your polity and governance, and for that automatically all the candidates of civil services, they are good in one subject, that is polity. So basically I won't be lecturing you on that. But whenever you have any legislation or any act of the parliament which is basically responsible for establishing a body, that big body is the statutory organization or the statutory body. Now, here, as per this order, the Ganga River Basin Authority was dissolved and it was replaced by the Ganga Council. So, this National Ganga Council, that was a replacement of the National Ganga River Basin Authority, which was constituted way back in 2009. Okay, so this was replaced. I will write it here so that it is easy to revise for you. Replaced by National Ganga Council in 2016. Okay, now the council has the overall responsibility of preventing pollution and rejuvenating the Ganga River Basin, infusing fresh life to the Ganga River Basin, including River Ganga and all its included tributaries. Jurisdiction extends to all the states where you have the river or its tributary draining through. So that jurisdiction is where the council has its jurisdiction, chiefly responsible for implementation of the National Mission for Clean Ganga. And National Mission for Clean Ganga, we have taken a look at the objectives of the National Mission for Clean Ganga as well. So if you have a question which is framed about river pollution and what are the steps taken by the government in order to curb river pollution, while you can talk about the various different measures of waste management, etc., eventually, you have to focus upon the fact about these particular objectives, about these particular programs, even though very briefly, if you end up mentioning it, it adds heft to the answer that you are framing. Okay, so that is where it will be required in your mains exam. Now we come to the portion of marine pollution. Now, marine pollution is what? Pollution of the marine waters, as simple as that. So when we talk about the seas and the oceans, now those seas and the oceans, when they get polluted, that is marine pollution by unwanted debris, by solid waste, by plastics, by oil spill, liquid waste. So the marine waters have been significantly polluted by us, and this has been happening for quite some time. Okay, so this is your definition of marine pollution, even though not required. But the introduction by man, directly or indirectly, of substances or energy to the marine environment, resulting in deleterious effects such as hazards to human health, hindrance to marine activities, impairment of the quality of seawater for various issues, and reduction of amenities. So basically, the pollution of the marine water, which has the various different disadvantage or the various different negative impacts, as simple as that. Now, when we talk about marine pollution, you have various different types of marine pollution. So when we think about pollution, automatically we think about a lot of garbage, lot of trash dumped in an area. But marine pollution is a larger term here. So what does it include? Eutrophication. Eutrophication we have already seen. So this is overloading of the water body with nutrients, and this can lead to harmful algal bloom. Then we have acidification. Acidification is, we will study it in the next module, when the overall pH value of the water starts coming down due to factors such as sometimes pollution as well, sometimes increased carbon dioxide absorption from the atmosphere. So this is where the lowering of the pH value happens. We'll study later on in detail what do we mean by acidification, what are the impact on the various different species due to acidification, what is the long-term impact of it, how it is initiated, all of that we'll study in the next module. So lowering of pH value of the seawater. I hope we are aware of acidic and alkaline as of now. I hope we don't have that level of confusion, right? We are aware of that. Good. So when we talk about acidity, what is the pH value of items which are referred to be acidic? Very good. Beautiful. Less than 7. Less than 7 on a pH scale means it is acidic. Now, around up till 6. For alkaline, it has to be greater than 7. Okay? 7 is the neutrality. So, just to ask you guys, and you are absolutely free to give an incorrect answer as well. So, as of now, oceanic water, when we talk about the entire aspect of acidification, oceanic water, is it acidic? Is it alkaline? As of now, what do you think? Slightly acidic. Acidic. Okay, good. Quite a good number of you have given the correct answer. Few of you have even managed to give the exact value, pH value on the acidic side, such as 5.6. That is quite accurate a figure for a wrong answer. So, so as of now, oceanic water is alkaline. It is basic in nature. Its pH value is still 8.1, around 8.1. When we talk about acidification, it is the lowering of that pH value which is happening, but nonetheless it is still acidic. It is going to continue to it is still alkaline, and it is going to remain alkaline for some substantial future. But then the rate at which the acidification is happening, that is the one which is alarming. Then you have toxins. Toxins which are released either due to the dumping of the solid waste, okay, dumping of whatever is being written. Is that visible to you guys? Whatever I am writing it out, is that visible to everyone? Right? Perfect. So here, when we talk about toxins, so dumping of and degradation of solid waste, and this happens chiefly from where? From the coastal areas. Then, other than that, you will also have the oil spills in various forms, which are responsible for the release of toxins, and also the shipping waste. Shipping waste, industrial discharge in the coastal areas as well. Okay, so these are the ways in which the toxins are introduced into the marine regions, into the marine areas. Then plastic, we know how plastic pollution is caused, and then you have underwater noise. Now, in the water bodies, sound is an efficient medium for communication. Now, that sound is used by various different species, such as when you consider whales, when you consider dolphins, they communicate with each other and along with each other with the help of that sound signal. Now, that is why sound is an important part here. Now, In fact, many of the species of or many of the cases of blue whales have been identified where they have been known to communicate for 100 kilometer plus with each other with the help of the specific kind of sounds. So in that circumstance, if let's suppose underwater suddenly you have a drilling noise, right? Because we drill underwater in order to extract oil, natural gas, etc. So let's suppose there's a drilling noise. Let's suppose there's a submarine which is moving. Let's suppose there's a ship which is moving. Now that will always end up altering the availability of the sound and the type of sound which is, or in a way, the communication ability of the species and how these species will survive. So this is largely caused by drilling action, and along with that, shipping and navigation. Or rather than navigation, navigation is something which can be covered when you talk about shipping. So submarines. Okay. So these are the various different types of marine pollution. Now, in the case of the marine pollution, we have been dumping the waste in the ocean for such a long time now. And it has been a kind of a reckless move of sorts, where regularly and continuously from all the coastal areas, the waste is being dumped somehow or the other in the ocean. Now, in the case of the Pacific, for example, this has led to the accumulation of all that waste which is generated. All that waste has gotten accumulated in the form of very large garbage patches, what is also referred to as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, this Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the territorial area of this, now it has reduced because for the past couple of years, there has been significant amount of cleaning action carried out by the various different civil society organizations, the NGOs, various different, few of the international partners as well. So they have been, with the help of skimmers, trying to clean out, and they do clean out millions of tons of waste on a regular basis. Now, even though the size of the garbage patch has reduced ever so slightly. But just to give you an idea, before the onset of the COVID pandemic, the size of the garbage patch, the territorial size of the garbage patch, the area of it was 3 times the area of the entirety of the country of Spain. So that gives you a clue about what large size of garbage patch we are talking about. Think about it. That much area in the case of the water is consisting only of garbage. Now, what happens? In the presence of that continuous availability of sunlight and heat, and also the acidity of the marine water, the plastics, etc., they start to in a way degrade somewhat, decompose, and the plastic breaks down in certain cases. You have various different waste which will release toxins into the water under the alkalinity of the oceanic water, under the conditions of, let's suppose, excess amount of sunlight. You will have some of the toxins released by the various different waste. But when it comes to plastics, they oftentimes they break down into very smaller particles, what we refer to as microbeads. Very small portions of plastics. Now that is when they start spreading in the water. Now, the aquatic species, when they see something of that size floating around, they consider it to be a part of the marine ecosystem in itself. We have already talked earlier about the entire aspect of marine snow, where you have a lot of biological matter which floats around in the ocean continuously, which serves as a source of food for a large number of species. So many of the species, they mistake this to be another type of the marine snow, and many of them, they have this microbead stuck in their respiratory channels. Some of them they inhale it, or they basically take it in. So you have bioaccumulation, biomagnification happening, and also in many of the cases instant death because of the blockade of the respiratory channel as well. So that is how it has a long term impact. It has a very significantly long term impact. So the garbage patch is the collection of the marine debris in the North Pacific Ocean, and marine debris is basically the litter that ends up in the large bodies of water. So here they are given out across the coastal areas. The coastal areas are the contributing ones. But then it is the circulation across the region of the Pacific. Across the region of the northern Pacific, you have various ocean currents, various gyres Madhur, I hope you are present in the session. And Madhur, you have been talking about this for the past 2 to 3 days. Please do reply to my mail if you haven't received or you are ignoring it. Do let me know. Madhur, kindly check your mailbox as well. I had seen your mail, I had given a reply to it, and basically, after that, you have not responded anything. I had asked you a certain set of questions, and you have not gotten back to me. Okay, so here when you are pointing these out in the middle of the class, when we are discussing a particular topic and you are pointing it out without maintaining any decorum, please ensure that you check it on your side as well. And please ensure that before, and first of all, when you send a mail to us, it is our prerogative to help you out, but that is it. Okay, there is no, and even in that you need to have or hold a certain point of decorum when you communicate with each other. I hope that is understandable for all of you. When you have these sort of issues, try to raise it at the end of the session or whenever we are taking questions. At the end of the session, if you again ask me question about what is hypoxic water, because at the time while we were discussing hypoxic water, you were busy typing out this kind of a message. So that will never be taken as kindly. And let me convey it in the harshest of the terms as possible. Okay, so before pointing out that your mail has been ignored, etc., etc., I did ask you, I will tell you in the, if you have asked this in the session, I will tell you in the session itself. I did ask you to fill me in about the level of preparation or the portions that you have managed to cover, and there you have not given any response. Okay, so just expecting that I have written something in the subject matter of the mail, and that now it is the onus on the faculty to spoon feed me. So that is something which is setting a very wrong precedent. Let me be very, very clear with you. Okay, why I am having this particular tone and tenor is because of the fact that you are raising this issue when we are bam in the middle of the discussion. Obviously that means the mind is not there in the topic being discussed. So kindly concentrate in the session. Please try to extract something out of this session. Please understand, everybody, please understand, you are waking up early in the morning to extract something productive for your examination. I hope that is the aim. And I also hope the realization is there in the mind that just waking up in the morning, sitting in front of the class, is not going to get you through the examination. Just because I woke up early in the morning, I'm attending the session, my examination will be cleared. If that would have happened, every early morning riser would have become a civil servant. You do need to put in some extra effort. We are putting in effort from our side. We expect the same from your side as well. Okay, I hope that is clear. I hope that message is received. I hope that message is understood. Okay, now we proceed. So we proceed ahead with the uh, portion of land pollution. Now, when we talk about Sneha, why Northern Indian Ocean is hypoxic? Northern Indian Ocean is hypoxic basically because of the aspect of you have lack of enough nutrients there in order to allow the phytoplanktons to breed, in order to allow the phytoplanktons to increase in population. You have in various different oceans, whenever upwelling as an action happens, that brings the phytoplankton population back into circulation. But here in the Northern Indian Ocean, that is not the case. And also, when you talk about the circulation of the Northern Indian Ocean, even the thermohaline circulation is missing here. Thermohaline circulation is where you have the water from the lower depth and the surface water. They tend to keep on mixing with each other due to difference in temperature, due to difference in salinity conditions. You have the water which tends to mix with each other. So that happens in the Atlantic. That happens to certain extent in the region of the Pacific as well. It does happen in the Southern Indian Ocean, but it does not take place in the Northern Indian Ocean. So it is because of this that you have the various issues which do arise about the hypoxic waters. Okay. Now, then we come to the portion of land pollution. Uh, Which portion of Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal are hypoxic? Is it only the northern Arabian Sea, Central Bay of Bengal? Central Bay of Bengal, a couple of years back, Sheikh, had been declared as one of the regions which was a dead zone. So it does happen. It does on a larger average, if you consider. That is where, so you have small patches which become dead zone. It is not as if once it becomes hypoxic, that water can never revert back to normalcy. It can happen in the immediate future, within, let's say, a couple of years, that water can return to normalcy, or in 2 to 3 years. So that can happen. But overall, on an average, the northern Indian Ocean is hypoxic. Okay, due to eutrophication at a point, the water body get over enriched by nutrient, but later on, slowly and steadily, it becomes hypoxic, isn't it? As sunlight is unable to penetrate. Yes, in eutrophication, Ilma, we have talked about this. Kindly take a look at the PPT. You will find there that in eutrophication we have talked about that once you have the settlement of the algae, that is when the penetration of the sunlight stops. Okay, now here, when we talk about land pollution, so land pollution basically is, in simplest of the terms, pollution of the land. Now, here also you have two aspects, that is the soil pollution as well as the land pollution. The difference is, even though cosmetic, but it is significant. When you hear about the term soil pollution, it is the topmost portion of the soil which is polluted. When we talk about land pollution, land pollution basically is when the amount of pollution extends even to the lower layers. That is the portion of that is what we consider as the land pollution. Okay, now this is something that we encounter on our day to day lives. On a daily basis we encounter this near the vicinity of our homes many of the times. But in our municipalities, in our cities, in our even semi urban areas, nowadays townships, we observe this quite significantly. Okay, so this is basically physical or chemical alteration to land causing the land use change. Addition of various different foreign elements to such an extent that it can no longer sustain the ecosystem that depended on it, majorly caused due to dumping and improper disposal of industrial and domestic waste. Now, difference between land and soil pollution. So when we talk about land pollution, degradation of the Earth's land surface, both above and below the ground level. Soil pollution is something which is restricted to the surface. Land pollution is something which moves significantly underground as well. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the causes of the land and the soil pollution that we experience. One is the agricultural activities. Agricultural activities, be it spraying of the insecticides, fertilizers, herbicides, weedicides, any of them that you see, now they will end up polluting the land areas always. Okay, so that is where herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, all of them, you add the chemicals to the land, you add the chemicals to the soil, and in the long run that can lead to soil degradation. In the long run it can lead to the decline in soil fertility, what we are already experiencing in the northwestern part of our country. That is something that you experience in the case of the agricultural activities induced on the land area. Then you also have mining and extraction activities. Now, as we have talked about yesterday as well, when you carry out the process of mining, now that will lead to significant amount of rocky materials getting discharged, significant amount of heavy contaminants which are trapped, they also get discharged, right? So that basically mining activity in a way is a source of contamination, is a source of pollution. And you have heavy elements such as mercury, arsenic, lead, antimony, cadmium, all of them are released. Why? Because mining means what? Breaking of rocks for the extraction of minerals. Now, those minerals won't be readily available to you. You need to break a larger section of rocks. Now, in the larger section of rocks, you can have other elements, other contaminants. Now, eventually, all the rocks that you have broken, not all of them will be carried out to the smelting plant. few of them will be disposed as waste there itself. That is how you have accumulation of the mining waste. And that accumulation of mining waste oftentimes is disastrous for the environment. Okay. Then urbanization. Now, increased case or increased rate of urbanization, that is something that we experience in our country. As per the last census of 2011, in the last census of 2011, we had the aspect that almost 35% of the Indian population is urban, almost 65% is rural. But since that point of time, also, the rate of migration to the urban areas, that is quite significant. The number of people moving to the urban areas is quite significant. Now, when you have people migrating to urban areas, now, well, few of them, they are migrating because of job transfers, etc. If you leave that category, if you consider the larger labor class, which ends up migrating, the migrant workers that we refer to, now, those migrant workers, they don't get the availability of good houses, good housing facility in urban area. It is very, very costly. It is not at all affordable. So, what does that mean? That majority of the migrant workers that you see, they will be living in slums. They will be living or developing certain hutments or settlements on the sides of the river channel, the river floodplain that you observe, particularly in the case of the region of Delhi. Now, in the slums and the hutments, sewage facility is not there, sanitation facility is not there, though aspect of taking care of the waste. So that is what causes significant amount of land pollution in that area. The land becomes so unproductive, concrete, etc. All of that is disposed of. Land becomes unproductive for a very long period of time. You won't find vegetation to be existent there. Okay. So increase in the number of cities, population, and industrialization, that also impacts the ecosystem. Waste is disposed of directly to water and soil from the various sources, and that also has given rise to various different types of diseases. Now, the total amount of solid waste in India, when we talk about the solid waste, now this is just an estimate. This is not a figure I want you to learn. I want you to think about and understand this pattern. I want you to catch the larger trend here. You don't have to learn the exact quantity because obviously this is going to get updated every particular year. Total quantity of solid waste generated is close to around 1,50,000 tons per day. This is the estimate, total solid waste. Efficiency of waste collection is only 96.8%. That means almost 3% of the waste. 3% of the waste of 1,50,000 comes out to be how much? Roughly close to around 5,000 tons per day. So roughly 5,000 tons per day is not even collected, right? 47% of the waste is treated, 25% of the total waste remains unaccounted. You have no transportation, etc., no logistical support which is given to these particular waste. Now, India is the third largest generator of solid waste in the world, but the rate at which we are going, we are set to achieve the higher figures very soon. Now, that solid waste, if you think about it, that can be broken down or can be subdivided, subclassified into municipal waste, industrial hazardous waste, or biomedical waste. Now, we'll take a look at each one of them, and this represents the solid waste generation per capita. TPD means tons per day, Namita. Having aware or being aware about pollution, yet people throw waste material in river. Whereas government launched many schemes with regard to river, but people don't take it seriously after some amount of time. People should be aware simultaneously for tackling water pollution. That is true. Any form of pollution that you talk about, any kind of significant amount of change in the environment that you see, that cannot happen without people or public participation. Even when you think about the larger perspective about, let's say, conservation of various species, even that cannot happen if the population is not participating in that process. Otherwise, it will always be, in a way, the fight that the governments will lead alone. And that is, please understand, government is also represented by the people themselves. It is basically the people from our society who get a job, who get a role in various arms or functionalities of the government. So if the society in a way is reckless about nature, is reckless about environment, that will reflect in the government's initiative, in the government's their urgency to take a particular action. So that also is reflected there. Okay. And I do know about Chenab getting polluted. Yes, that is true. Even in the hilly mountainous areas, the rivers are getting polluted. Now, the solid waste generated per capita, here, if you observe, the waste generated per capita means number of individuals. So here, you will observe ever so slight rate of decline, which has been indicated. Why do you think that decline has happened? Have we started becoming much more environmentally friendly? Are we ensuring that there is lesser waste generation by us? Why do you think? Take a guess. Why do you think that the solid waste generated per capita has reduced? Correct. Deepika and Alok. That is because the population has been increasing. It is not as if the total waste generated is reducing, but the population is increasing. Anything per capita means you have to divide it by the absolute population. So the population is ever on the rise, and that is why you will observe that obviously the total amount of waste that is dumped is not increasing exponentially. If that would have happened, per capita waste generation would not have reduced. But that is the aspect or the factuality of it. Now, when we talk about municipal waste, what is the municipal waste? In simple terms, waste generated from the municipality. Any municipality that you live in or that you see. Now, in that municipality, where is the waste going to be generated from? From the households, from the small businesses, from hotels, from, in certain cases, when you talk about the construction materials, the construction debris, all of that basically is the waste which is generated. Okay. So, municipal solid waste consists of household waste, construction and demolition debris, sanitation residue, and also waste from the streets, which are generated by the small businesses many of the times. Now, that municipal waste comprises of both solid and liquid waste. Toxic and greenhouse gases are released from the decay of organic matter in landfills, etc. Wherever you have the municipal waste which is dumped out in the open, you have various different toxins and gases. Which gases are released in particular from the waste dumping? Let me see. Methane, very good. Other than that, H2S. Good. Hydrogen sulfide is also released. Very good. So carbon compounds are also released, but majorly you have methane, sulfur compounds, etc., which oftentimes are released. Now, municipal solid waste can be divided into biodegradable and non-biodegradable waste. Overall, when we talk about the industrial or hazardous waste, they are generated from the various industrial discharges. And this industrial discharge, it slowly and steadily seeps in into the land area, and then eventually it drains the soil of all its natural fertility, of all the natural nutrient cover, and it makes the soil unusable for a very long period of time. So this industrial and hazardous waste, when it is dumped out there in the open, it can lead to soil degradation instantly. It can kill all the biodiversity in that localized region, and it can cause bioaccumulation and magnification in the long run. So all the people who somehow or the other are linked directly or indirectly from that particular region, from that particular farmland, etc., or they get water supply from the nearby stream or the river, all of them, they get impacted whenever you have the industrial or hazardous waste which is dumped. Okay, so this will include the waste generated by fabrication or the industrial processes, cafeteria refuse, dirt and gravel, masonry, mortar, fly ash, metallic residues. Now, what is fly ash and from where do we get that fly ash? Which industry generates fly ash in its production? Are we aware of that? Coal, very good. Burning of coal. So fly ash is basically generated from the region of the chiefly thermal power plants. Okay. It is also generated from some other industries, but chiefly from the thermal power plants where you have the burning of the coal. Now, that fly ash consists of very heavy contaminants. You have aluminum silicates and so on. You have, in certain cases, you have various other types of contaminants also which are present, including mercury and etc. Now, that is the fly ash which is released into the atmosphere. Earlier, it would be released into the atmosphere. Nowadays, with the help of the electrostatic precipitators and so on, you don't have that much fly ash released into the atmosphere. Now, that fly ash would get settled down around the region of the power plants. Immediately, that would lead to the death of the plants in the region because all that fly ash would settle down on the leaves and thereby blocking the availability of sunlight for the process of photosynthesis. Right? Also, that fly ash would be dumped into the nearby water body, thinking about it that the land will take care of it or the natural environment will take care of it. But obviously, over a period of time, this has indicated a lot of disadvantageous effect on the health of the local population and also on the local biodiversity. So that is why now, due to governmental initiatives and the governmental measures, utility of that fly ash has been basically diversified. For example, now you have the manufacturing of fly ash bricks. Okay, so we have fly ash bricks. Now that is very, very light as well. Now that is to be used for pavement purposes, for also the construction materials. So that is where it can be used quite productively. It will generate jobs in the process as well, and it basically brings about the entire process of reuse recycling. So you don't, when you, let's suppose, manufacture bricks, where do you manufacture it from? From the soil. Now, rather than this, you use the fly ash bricks, which is anyways, fly ash is getting generated. In fact, the government has mandated its use within the few kilometer area of the thermal power plants. Okay, then in certain small trace quantity is where the important terminology here. When we talk about in very small trace quantity, in very small proportions, that fly ash can also increase the fertility of the soil sometimes. Okay, it can end up increasing the fertility of the soil concerned in very small quantity. If you provide it in large quantity, the soil will be destroyed. In very small quantity, it can also benefit the soil fertility. Okay, and we live in NTPC area and we always find fly ash coloring the porch darker. That is true. And that is where you understand about the industrial pollution. Those of you living in the mining towns of the country, the mining places of the country, you would frequently get the darker coal dust, and many of them to the grade of PM 2.5, settling around all the goods and all the various different items that you have in your household. You would have the observation of that. Those of you living near the iron and steel plants, now in those areas, if you observe, the water bodies, they start getting polluted, and the amount of population of the species in the water bodies, that starts to rapidly decrease. One of the leading factors or the causes of that is that the iron steel, in many of the cases, the iron steel plant, it has got a large cooling pond. But then that heated water which is getting discharged, that causes the pollution in that area as well. Okay. So industrial pollution is quite significantly damaging. Now, many of the industries, have faced shutdowns because they have been known to cause cancer because of the effluents that they are releasing, right? They have been known to cause cancer. Now, immediately, what you need to be doing in that case is not order an immediate shutdown of the industry, but take curative measures. Because at the end of the day, that industry is the one which is supporting the entire township. That industry is the one which is supporting the entire economy of the region, if not the entirety of the country. So one needs to take the curative steps, that if, let's suppose, the contamination is still found, or order the shutdown of the industry. But in the process, ensure that newer equipments are installed and then the industry is allowed to operate. Okay. I'm sure you would be aware about the Sterlite plant issue in Tamil Nadu. Now, this was one of the issues where the public anger eventually led to the complete shutdown of that particular industry, and that was very, very useful for copper smelting. Now, copper is one of those minerals in which India is deficient in, and we need a lot of copper going ahead for electrification processes. Now, the shutdown of that industry did not happen for the aspect of newer equipments being installed and so on. The shutdown eventually became a political sentiment. Once the industrial shutdown becomes a political sentiment, there is no coming back from that. So now what is happening is, after the shutdown of that industry, now India is completely dependent on Chinese imports for the copper smelting. Even the local economy, at that point of time, all the news media channels, they looked upon that particular area. Now they are not, anyways, they are not highlighting the issue that whether the local economy is impacted by that or not. So while industries are important, they need to be sustainable, they need to be responsible. If not, you have to impose a strict and a tough penalty, but ensure that the kind of curative steps and corrective steps, so to say, they are taken. Okay. Now, what the entire narrative that I have given here, guys, this is going to be helpful for you eventually when you talk about, in interview process also this is asked, in ethics paper also this is asked. So you should have that broader viewpoint of what is happening with the industries and why is it happening. In the past, industrialization is a prime example when average of people came down to 29. Himanshu, are you talking about the average life expectancy? Average life expectancy when it came to around 29 or 32 in the case of newly independent India, that was not on the back of industrialization. That was on the back of exploitation, lack of medical services, etc. Okay, so that was different. Deepika, fly ash would be devoid of any organic matter, then how can it help in improving soil fertility? So, please understand, soil fertility does not only mean the presence of organic matter. The soil does require various different nutrients, major and minor nutrients. Amongst the major nutrients that the soil requires, you have the simple ones: nitrogen, potash, phosphate. These are the major nutrients. But on the level of minor nutrients, it does require some amount of borate, some amount of zinc as well, some amount of magnesium as well, some amount of calcium as well. So these are also the nutrients which the soil requires. So that is why eventually, in very trace quantity, in very small quantity, if mixed with the soil, these smaller nutrients, they start getting enriched. Okay. I hope that is understood. A main topic on fly ash has been asked earlier. You will study about fly ash in further detail in the portion of science and tech. And sulfur also, yes. And those living around the plants and such hazardous industry may have to face the risk of carcinogenic or asthma like disease. They do suffer from. What is also referred to as occupational hazards. I'm sure you would have studied it in your elementary science books, but if you have not, I'm sure that in case you are not aware, that workers of certain industries, they get impacted with diseases because they are working in those industries. For example, you had the entire problem of life expectancy in the coal mining areas during the 1800s, during the early 1900s in particular. The average life expectancy would reduce quite significantly because of what would be referred to as the black lung disease, where you had small particles getting inhaled and deposited in the lung, and the lung capacity will reduce, lung would be open to infections, and people would die very soon. Then people working in the case of glass industries, now they would be in a way exposed to very small amount of silica, and that would be, or very small size of silica continuously, and that would lead to silicosis, right? Similarly, those of them working in asbestos, now they would get cancer as a result of it. That is why now ship breaking yards, I hope we are aware that ship breaking is a large industry. Ship breaking, where you dismantle the older ships, where you extract the utilizable parts. Now India used to be one of those hubs for ship breaking. It still is one of the major players, but now we have stopped the large scale breaking of the ships because it was found out that you have asbestos in large quantity, which is obviously present in those ships. And that asbestos, when you break it out, now that many of the times is cancer causing. So these are what are referred to as occupational hazards. Okay. Manufacturing bangle as well. Okay. Now, industrial waste in India, I have not given you with the latest data. The latest data is not even required for this. You just need to be aware of the larger trend here. So basically, if you take a look at the overall uh, waste which is generated, you would observe that significant amount of that waste is actually utilizable, right? You can carry the reuse or reutilization of that. Then around 25% of the waste can be treated in landfills. That is mostly your organic waste, which is given out in the landfill so that it gets converted into organic matter, replenishes the fertility of soil in that region. Now around 27% is recyclable. Okay. And around 4% is incinerable. Incinerable means incineration means you carry out the process of combustion, you burn it out. So you have certain types of waste which eventually you will break it down into many small, the inorganic waste variety, that is, you will break it down, pulverize it into small sizes of few millimeters, and then you will carry out the complete combustion. So, but overall, the overwhelming majority of that waste is either recyclable or reutilizable, right? So, recyclable or utilizable, that consists of close to around 70% of the waste, total waste, including the imported and the existing stock. So, imported means what? Are we importing the waste? Yes, we are. In certain cases, we have been importing the waste as well. Why? In order to extract some material out of that waste, and also in order to gain some money, monetary reward. Because many of the developed nations, what they do, the developed nations, they will send the waste into developing nations, and they will pay the developing nations as a consequence of it. So that had been a very prevalent practice in large parts of the country. It has reduced, but it is still carried on. It is in those waste which is transported by the developed nations, that is where many of the developed nations would basically end up putting various chemical hazardous materials, etc., and various different hazardous material, that let the developing country take care of it. Let me keep my own backyard cleaner. That is why you had the various conventions such as the Basel, the Rotterdam conventions which came in. We'll take a look at it later. Okay. Ship breaking is one of those ideal examples, correct? Now we come to biomedical waste. Now, biomedical waste, I hope we are able to understand. Biomedical waste is what generated from the hospitals, the various different primary healthcare centers, etc. That is what is biomedical waste. Now, just to give you an overall idea about how dangerous or damaging that can be. Now, first of all, when we talk about the hospitals significantly utilize a lot of medicines. Now these medicines, many of them, they get expired in the hospital itself. The expiry date comes, and those medicines, those pills, they are not utilized. Now there is a large scale dumping of these materials out in the open sometimes, which is carried on. Now whenever that happens, think about it, that you are dumping antibiotics, you are dumping significant amount of materials. Now that will not only lead to bioaccumulation, contamination, kill the biodiversity in that area. More dangerously, what the trend has found out is, because of these kinds of pollution which is carried out so easily, various microbes, they are getting resistant to the antibodies and the antibiotics. And that is when those microbes, now when they are impacting us, when they are infecting us, that disease is very difficult to cure. What we refer to as the antimicrobial resistance, right? So the antimicrobial resistance, so the microbes, they become resistant to the drugs. So you need to be administered with a higher grade of antibiotics when you go to the hospital. And this is leading to its own set of complications, where the healthcare of the individuals in the long run, they are getting impacted. Okay, so this is one of the reasons, or one of the impact of it. Other impact is that many of the materials in the medical industry, medicinal industry, which is used, that is radioactive in nature. Many of them, they become radioactive in nature. Now, that is where, for example, you have certain biomarkers, you have certain chemicals which are used. Now, they are radioactive. When they are disposed of randomly, they can impact the local biodiversity. Thirdly, when we talk about the entire medical industry or the hospital sector, you have various different infected bandages, in certain cases, body parts as well. Now, if they are not disposed of properly, there is a significant chance of infection spreading around. Something that we experienced very significantly during the COVID pandemic. During the time of the COVID pandemic, we experienced that a lot of bandages with blood stains, etc., being disposed of randomly into the street. Now, what happened, or what could have happened eventually, we don't know if it has actually happened or not, that this infection can spread in larger population areas as well. And infection can keep on getting spread, or can actually continue to spread even further down the line in terms of time as well. So that is why biomedical waste needs to be handled and catered to care. Okay. And yes, organs also can lead to the drug resistant microbes. Yes, that is what the drug resistant, the antimicrobial resistant that we talk about. That is, the antimicrobial is what? The antimicrobials that we consume, right? Now, the drugs that we consume, so the microbes become resistant to that. Okay. Now, then comes how it can be treated. So here you will see that biomedical waste, depending upon the type of waste that is generated, you have the various ways in which they can be disposed of. For example, when we talk about the needles and the cut glass, now those needles and cut glass, they are put under white plastic container. Now nowadays, when you go to the hospitals, if the hospital is fair enough, in the sense that it is maintained, not the best of the five-star hospitals in the country, I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about the general good hospitals that you have. So you will observe the different colored plastic bins, or the waste bins which are present in the hospital, right? You will be able to figure it out. Now that is something that you would not find to be present in the hospitals. 15 years back. Okay, that is a very significantly newer addition. So that is why you will observe that and this has been happening since 2011 onwards. This change has been brought about, and this change has been inculcated in the various hospitals. Slowly and steadily, the expectation is that as we move ahead, slowly and steadily, the situation will improve. Now, the white plastic container will include needles and cut glasses. Now, they are either buried under in a deep pit or taken to a common treatment facility where they are disinfected and so on. Now, before that, also they are disinfected with a chlorine solution. They are disinfected of all the microbes. Syringes, gloves, plastic waste, etc. That is where you have the blue container that you observe. Then the anatomical waste, the body parts, etc. That is what you see in the yellow containers. The yellow containers go for deep burial. The plastic blue container goes for recycling, that is syringes, gloves, etc. You can treat them, disinfect them, recycle them, but not about the body parts. Then infected dressing, the plaster of Paris cast casings that you have in case of, let's suppose, a fractured bone or something, that again goes for a deep burial in a red plastic container. And then you have the drug waste, etc., which goes in the black container, and that is in a secured landfill site to prevent contamination and spreading thereby. Okay, so the next time that you visit, I hope you don't need to visit a hospital, but the next time that you do so, you will observe these, or you definitely will observe these different types. Now, just to give you a clue about our handling of the biomedical waste. Now, of the total amount of biomedical waste which is generated, a lot of that is not even collected, especially in the smaller towns, suburbs, where you have many of the smaller private clinics and private nursing homes which are operating. They don't operate with the same amount of responsibility, do they? They will have a common disposal, and they will dispose the material along with the municipal waste itself. Right? Many of the nursing homes, you will find that their waste disposal is carried out along with the municipal solid waste. So there is some issue in terms of compliance. Now, around 619 tons per day of biomedical waste was generated. Now, this is just to give you a trend. This is not to give you the data pointer here. So it was generated in 2018-19. Before that is a pre-pandemic. After pandemic or during the pandemic years, during the time of COVID years, obviously this got skewed. Now, here you will observe that only 544 tons per day is treated and disposed of. 74 tons per day that gets disposed through deep burials located at isolated places. So you can imagine that significant proportion, close to around 74 tons of biomedical waste, is not even accounted for, is not even collected for. So that gives you the idea about the how humongous the particular problem associated with is. Okay. Now, one of the major creations of mankind, one of the major causes of pollution induced by mankind is plastic. So, when we talk about plastics and microplastics, these also act as a pollutant, a contaminant. Now, that plastic does not degrade easily, continues to stay in the atmosphere or in the ground surface in the ecosystem for a very long period of time. Many of the times, sadly, it is ingested by the various different cattle species. You will find various different cows uh, and buffaloes in certain cases in the urban areas. They move through the garbage in order to search for some food. They keep on munching through the various plastics, and that sadly leads to their death. A lot of that cattle death in our country particularly happens due to plastic consumption. Okay, so plastic waste or plastic pollution is the accumulation of the plastic objects in the Earth's environment that adversely affects the wildlife, wild habitat, and so on. Microplastics are basically the smaller size of the plastics that occur in the environment as a consequence. So when you have the existing plastics which break down into many smaller pieces. That is when these microplastics are generated. Okay, and these microplastics will always end up impacting the larger food chain. These will impact through bio contamination, bioaccumulation, biomagnification as well. Now, here, if you take a look at the plastic waste generated in the country, you will observe an ever increasing trend, and that is going to be there with the populational expansion and the economic expansion and growth. The plastic consumption sadly is also increasing in the same proportion. This is where we need to find alternatives to plastic. That is the must, right? Alternative to plastic. Now those alternative Now, when we talk about alternatives, now the sad reality of the fact is that when it comes to how cheap or affordable the plastic is, that is economic viability. When we talk about how easily available plastic is, and when we talk about the carrying capacity of plastic, you rarely get a material which can replace it. You can use cotton bags or paper bags. Paper bags will never have the same carrying capacity at the same cheaper rate, right? So that is why if you use jute will be very costly. It can have a larger carrying capacity, but it will be very costly. So that is why you can have materials made out of coir, for example, right? So there is a need to develop alternatives. Otherwise, plastic is there to stay with us all for a long time, regardless of the various government schemes which have been initiated to ban the utility of plastics. Okay, now then comes e-waste. E-waste is what? That is the waste that is electronic and electrical waste. What is also the electrical and electronic equipment that is referred to as EEE? That is basically the e-waste. Now, the from the bulb in your house which has stopped functioning, to your older mobile phones, to the older television set which no longer functions, to your older laptops, all of that comprises of in the e-waste. The problem where it arises is that in our country, many of the times we are not aware, in majority of the cases we are not aware what to do with electronic waste, how to deal with electronic waste. Many of you would attest to the fact that in many of your households you would still be having in some corner or the other the first mobile phone that your household would have bought, right? That mobile phone would not be functioning anymore. It would have been kept somewhere on the sides, thinking about it that someday it might come to use. They would have bought a newer phone around you. They would have put the older phone which has stopped functioning. First of all, the usage of electronic items still in many parts of the country is until it is completely dead, it has no life left in it. We will use it till that point of time. You will find the older generation in that particularly much more meticulous. Now, they will keep the older mobile phones. They will keep the older television set somewhere stored in the house, in some corner of the house. Why? We'll use it someday. Which day? Because the technology is also changing. Now you will never find replacement of the items which made the mobile phone way back in 2000s. So that is because we don't know what to do with that waste. If we have an old phone, what to do with that? If it is not being used anymore, how to basically dispose that? That is something that is lacking. So that is where the e-waste problem in our country is expanding. And India has a youthful population, mind you. 65% of the population is below the age of 35 years. So that means the adaptability of electronic item is going to be much higher going ahead into the future, right? You will have lot more number of people utilizing the electronic items, using it for some purpose or the other, and eventually technology changes in 1 year or 2 years, it is disposed of. So the e-waste problem in India is going to be very, very monumental in the coming years, in the coming decades. So that is why we need to get our act together when it comes to e-waste management. So that is where the government has also brought in the newer legislation of e-waste management bill, e-waste management rules rather, and also the concept of extended producer responsibility, which was first introduced in e-waste, that has been made much more stringent here. Now, here basically the e-waste. Now, e-waste, electronic waste, many of the printed circuit boards, etc., that you see, in that electronic waste, they will also consist of precious materials. Precious materials such as gold, silver, platinum, etc. Even though in very small quantity, but they will consist of that. Now, it is very small in quantity. So please don't start breaking your mobile phones thinking I will extract gold because I need some money. No, it is present in small quantity and you need ideal equipments. You need the perfect understanding of the mechanism to be able to extract that. And once you extract those precious materials, you can utilize them in the manufacturing of the newer materials as well. So the cost of the newer electronic items will come down. China has developed a very well ingrained ecosystem for that recycling and reusing of those electronic items, where you have large scale industries which have been set up for extraction of precious materials and utilizable materials and recyclable materials out of those waste. That is an ecosystem which we need to develop. But other than that, they will have some heavy contaminants, sometimes mercury, PVC, etc., silica, that is also released. Okay. Now, yes, as I was telling you, even yes, the one thing that I forgot to give the example, the older cameras. Many of the households you will find the older camera reels as well. Yes, and older cameras also stored away somewhere, never to be used again. The hope is that it will be in use. I will give it to someone, but that day will never come because that utilization will never happen unless and until there is someone who will pay you for that waste. Okay, so that is basically the aspect of electronic waste. Now, 95% of e-waste in India is recycled by the informal sector. That is a problem because when you have a large scale operation in the informal sector, then basically the dealers will not be able to extract the materials efficiently. There won't be perfect working conditions there, obviously. So lesser efficiency, they don't know the proper technology, so many of the materials will go to waste. And along with that, in the process, they might end up polluting the environment and their surrounding to a greater extent, right? So the problem of pollution might eventually get exaggerated in the process. So that is the problem of e-waste. So here you observe along with the chart that the e-waste generation in the country is expected to grow up rapidly, exponentially in the coming years, almost by around 40 times. Presently, the e-waste generation in the country is close to around 4 million metric tons. That is the or roughly the present generation of e-waste, right? Now, that is expected to move to around 161 million metric tons going ahead into the near future. So by 2050. So you can imagine that unless and until, and please understand, because of the expanding population, more people will buy the smartphones, more people will buy the electronic devices and electronic items. Nowadays, you will have kids of 2 years age, 1 year age, they are adept at handling smartphone or at least putting their fingers across, watching the videos on the various different channels. So that is going to expand its footprint. So what do we need? We need a perfect ecosystem to handle that waste, to extract the utilizable materials out of that waste, and thereby develop a circular economy. Okay. Now we talk about solar panels also. Yes, solar panels. have added on significantly as we move into the new era of renewables. Solar panel have added on significant amount of waste generation. Okay. Now, then we come to the effect or the impact of land pollution. So all of these we have already discussed, but one by one, if you think about it, agriculture, on the agriculture, what is the issue? So it reduces the nitrogen fixation of the soil. Once the land gets polluted, the microbes will be dead. The microbes which carry out the nitrogen fixation, they will die. Then it will reduce the soil fertility. Pesticides will kill the nutrients of the soil, and in the long run, after the soil quality has degraded, the amount of crop yield or the crop productivity would also be significantly reducing. Then the health impact, breathing disorders, right? Skin diseases, release of lead in the soil, which leads to neurodegenerative diseases many of the times, especially in the case of the young ones. Landfills and waste dumping also leads to air pollution by release of the waste gases. Then reduced vegetation leads to barren land, can lead to desertification also, can lead to desertification. Ecological imbalance is caused or created in the sense that the recycling process of the ecology, that is damaged, that is broken in some part. Imbalance in the soil flora and fauna because of the toxins which are generated, water pollution, loss of topsoil, because the topsoil becomes barren, prone to soil erosion. So these are the various issues due to land pollution in the urban areas. That pollution also leads to clogging of drains, which can lead to flood, so that causes urban floods. Urban floods always will bring about diseases. Okay. Inundation of areas, foul smell and release of gases, waste management problems, aesthetics of the region also get impacted. Now we'll come to the prevention and control measures of pollution, where we'll talk about the entire principle of the integrated waste management. That what are the various different ways, what are the various different steps in which the waste can be managed in a particular area. Before that, we'll take a break. Uh, okay, we'll take a break till 8 a.m. and we'll be back at 8 a.m. Okay, let's take a break. We'll talk about the legislations also, the plastic rules, waste rules of 2022, e-waste rules of 2022, all of that, along with certain conventions such as Rotterdam, Stockholm Convention, Basel Convention. We'll take a look after the break. Okay. The previous slide is not worth anything, so we'll leave it here. A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm. Thank you. Now, now we come to the principles of integrated waste management. What do we mean by that? Now, normally when you think about management of waste, so what comes to your mind? Waste collection, waste disposal, that is it, right? That you should be collecting waste, you should be disposing the waste. But waste management is a much larger proposition than that. In fact, you have, and on a very serious note, you have basically got specialized courses developed in very good universities about waste management. You get specific degrees on that. And such professionals are in very high demand nowadays across many parts of the Western world, across the regions of Singapore, etc. The job profile that they get is also nice. So, waste management is a very large concept. That is something that you have to understand. Now, from here, you can have as basic a mains question framed from this region, that what is understood by integrated waste management? Elaborate. As simple as that. So you have to understand from the time or the moment that the waste is generated to the moment that the entire waste is disposed of. There are a lot of various different processes in between which needs to be kept in mind, which needs to be smoothened in a way in order to ensure that there is optimal utilization of the waste. So what are those steps? So basically, first of all, you need certain aspects in this. So let us analyze each one of them one by one. So, waste disposal and management facilities and facilities management. So, where are you disposing the waste? Generally, in the municipalities, for example, all the waste that is generated, all the waste that is collected, now that after that, you need to segregate them into organic, inorganic waste, biodegradable, non biodegradable example. So, you need to segregate them, then you need to treat them. Right. So your waste disposal facilities, they need to be modern, they need to be up to date, and much more importantly, they need to have the capability to handle the waste generated by the city. In majority of our urban areas, the problem is that the waste generated by the city is so high that you don't have enough amount of waste handling capacity. So that is one proportion of it. Then comes legal compliance. What is the meaning of legal compliance here? That indicates the aspect or includes the aspect of reportage or reporting here. So let's suppose, as an entity, as an institution, let's suppose I have got a particular target. I have got a target that I cannot emit or I cannot have a discharge of more than XYZ amount of waste from my facility. That is the target that I have. But if I am continuing to generate more waste, so there needs to be a reporting of it. There needs to be a kind of a formalization of that. The city should be knowing about it. The municipality should be aware of that, that somebody is flouting the norms. Right. So that reporting of the waste, what is the total waste generated of the urban areas? Now, in many of the urban areas, we don't have a clue, that we only have an estimate. The total waste generated across the country that we talk about in India, that floats only on estimate. There's no real time value about it, because at any point of time, you would observe that you have many such small operations continuing and functioning in the cities, in the urban areas, in many small parts, where the waste that is generated, that is not at all accounted for. So that is where the legal compliance angle comes into the picture. Then technical services. Waste, now technical services, by the way, also includes research and development. Research and development, how will it be useful or important here? So let's say, for example, that you carry out, or any waste that you talk about, plastic waste. Now that plastic waste, by the way, I'm sure all of you would be aware of that, that the plastic is being utilized by National Highways Authority of India in the manufacturing of certain roads. I'm sure you are aware of that, where that plastic waste, any of us who is not aware of this particular aspect? So most of us are aware. Good. So that plastic waste is mixed with bitumen, and then the road paving and the road laying exercise is carried out, and that road becomes much more durable as well. Now, in order to do that, you need to carry out research. That research is needed. Randomly you cannot think about or conjure up these imaginations in your mind that, okay, you know what, plastic, if we use it in the rocket engines, it will work. No, you need to carry out research. So research and development about how to handle the waste, how to utilize that waste, that comes under technical services, understanding the utility and carrying out research and development. Then yes, even the microbes which carry out bioremediation, they also require the presence of technical services. Then you have on-site services. Now, on-site services basically talks about minimization of the waste which is generated, right? If you reduce the total waste that is generated over a period of time, obviously you will be able to handle the waste in significant proportion, right? You will be able to handle the waste very ably well. So for that, what do you need? You need to use recyclable items much more. For example, if you ban single use plastic items and you use recyclable plastics, people will not throw recyclable plastics on a daily basis. So that is where waste minimization has to be carried out, and that will come with reuse, recycle. Then resource recovery. So, for example, from the various different scrap waste, from e-waste, etc., what is the total amount of resources that you can recover, the precious materials and elements that you can recover, which you can then utilize for other manufacturing processes, right? So this is where metal recovery, recycling, etc., is also included. Solid and liquid waste management. Commodity trading. Commodity trading means what? Let's suppose I have extracted some amount of gold, I have extracted some amount of silver, some amount of, let's suppose, platinum out of the various different types of waste. What do I do with that? Where do I go with that? So for that, I need a platform, commodity trading, right? The commodity that I have extracted, I need to be able to trade that. Otherwise, that now in the lack of that platform, what happens? The entire operation does continue in the black money or the black economy. That is never good, isn't it? So that commodity trading needs to come into. And then waste logistics also. So how do you carry that waste? How do you transport that waste from one region to another? That is very much inclusive or included in the part of waste logistics. Okay. Now, this is where we are lacking in significant number of areas. This is also where we are lacking. This is also where we are lacking in terms of legal compliance, in terms of technical services also we are lacking. In the terms of on-site services, in all these areas, we are found to be lacking. When we talk about waste logistics, transportation of the waste from the collection centers to the disposal centers, now that is a very required task. Now, in almost all the areas that you are living in, now there you would observe that either the waste is basically carried by a very rickety sort of an auto rickshaw, a three-wheeler, where you will actually be surprised that how that vehicle is still operating, because many of the times it will be so old, and more importantly, it will be so overloaded that it will continue to give out that waste on the road continuously, showing a continuous trail where that waste truck or the waste vehicle has gone by, right? All the materials, they are dumped on the road. So that logistics, that needs to be sorted out. Now, when you sort out logistic, it needs to be efficient, it needs to be affordable, it needs to be quick at the same time. Okay. So these principles of integrated waste management you need to be aware of, right? Legal compliance portion, Abhijit, is basically about the entire aspect. Let's suppose, as we will come to the various aspects of e-waste management rules and plastic waste management rules. Now, the CPCB and the government also sets a norm. that okay, if whatever amount of waste that you are generating, report that, or accordingly you will have a target for extended producer responsibility. It is there where many of the industries and industrial waste in particular, that goes unreported. That is where the account is not kept, that okay, what is the total waste generated. Now what happens in that case is that your handling capacity is not developed as per the amount of waste generated. So unless and until you have the exact estimate of total waste generated, unless and until you ensure that the minimum standard that you have fixed for the various different organizations and the companies, are they adhering to that, are they having that legal compliance or not. For example, if I have told you that Abhijit, you cannot emit more than 100 tons of waste, and you are generating 150 tons, so that is a kind of a violation. So that needs to be sorted out. Okay, I hope that is understood. Commodity trading is basically when you have the materials, metals, for example, precious elements, etc. Now, will you be able to sell them? If I'm an extractor who will extract certain items from this, will I be able to sell them out there in the market? Or will I have to go to the black market to sell that in the black market? So that is where you need a commodity trading platform, right? So that commodity trading platform, where all the extracted materials you can sell, you can buy as well for the manufacturing of new items. So that will provide a kind of a transparent economic setup in the entire circular economic system. And people themselves, in my area, people themselves burn the accumulated waste. So that is what we had talked about in the aspect of air pollution itself, that burning of material is one of the favorite pastimes that we have, and the amount of waste that is generated into the air as a consequence of this, that is simply uh, something which goes unaccounted for. And the sad reality is that yes, municipality also does that. And proper segregation of municipal waste at source is the first and necessary step for the utilization. Uh, for transforming waste into energy or biofertilizers, what can we as citizens do when the municipality does not necessitate? So, municipalities across the various different parts of the country, they have been mandated to ask the citizens, urge the citizens to ensure segregation of waste at source. But that is not happening owing to the resilience, in a way. Resilience will be the wrong term, but the resistance indicated by the citizenry. We citizens, we are ourselves are not ready to do that. If we bring about that good practices, the municipality will be more than happy with us. Okay, then can we mention the increase in use of biocomposites as remedial measures to tackle, so that is also a kind of a recycling material method, Alok? Yes, you can. Okay, now, methods for waste management. What are the various ways in which the waste is treated and the waste is tackled, especially in our country and also across the world? So, you'll find open dumps. This is the most common sight and a common feature where you have the garbage or the waste which is dumped out into the open. That is the open dump. Uncovered sites, basically, uncovered sites where solid waste of various different types is dumped. It is commingled waste. Okay, it isn't separated, and it is the waste which has got liquid waste, solid waste, biodegradable waste, inorganic waste. All of that is mixed in that. That is the most common type of waste dump that you see across the majority of the urban areas around your region. Okay, now in order to solve the problem imposed by open dumps, there was the occurrence of these landfills or the advent of these landfills, and this process was used. What is a landfill? We have seen yesterday itself, but just a quick recap here. When we talk about the landfills, so basically, in order to dump the waste, you dig the land, you cover that with waste. What kind of waste? Ideally, in landfill, you should put biodegradable waste. Okay, ideally, ideally, the biodegradable waste should be put there. But then you have the various different types of commingled and mixed waste which is put there. And the process is that you cover it with a thin layer of the soil. That is what is a landfill. But almost a decade back or so, you had almost all the major cities of the country. They started running out of the space for landfills, because landfills, wherever you have the city limits, in the externalities you will have these landfills. So all the major city spaces, they started running out of the area where they can use the landfills. So what the metropolitan or the municipalities of these regions they started doing is, they started dumping more waste on these landfills. They did not cover it with soil. As a consequence, almost all of these landfills, many of these landfills, they have turned into open dump sites, which has further exaggerated issues in regions such as Delhi, NCR, and its vicinity. Now, with the landfills, the problem of leaching is quite significant. Something that we saw about how groundwater gets polluted, where all the materials, when they get compressed due to the weight of the waste, please understand, waste that is generated is quite heavy. So, all that waste, when they will exert significant amount of weight, significant amount of pressure here, so all that toxins, they will start leaching to the underground region. They will contaminate the land. In the vicinity also, they will contaminate the land, and they will contaminate the groundwater as well. So there is a kind of a long term contamination which is carried out. So land filling is done for the following type of waste: commingled waste, which is a mixed waste not found suitable for processing, where you have the some amount of inorganic material mixed with a lot of organic material. Extraction is not possible. Pre-processing and post-processing rejects from the waste processing sites. Non-hazardous waste not being processed or recycled, that is also given out in landfills. In many of the regions, in deeper areas of landfills also, you basically put them out. Now, adverse pedoclimatic conditions in the landfill cover soil such as gas problems. So, in these landfills, decomposition will happen. Gas will be released. Heat will always be released in the region, right? So, which gas? So, you need to provide certain outlets for the exit of those gases, so that the gas is not trapped in the inside. That can lead to disastrous circumstances as well. It will lead to nutrient deficiency, elevated temperature because of the rate of decomposition being carried on. So this is what a landfill is, and the landfill getting converted into an open dump. That is what the reality of almost all the urban areas in our country turn out to be. Now, when we talk about the problem faced by the landfill, we have seen that one of the major problem is that of toxins leaching into the lower region. That is one of the major issues which is posed. All the toxins, they move to the lower reaches. Now here, to get rid of that problem, we have the concept which we refer to as sanitary landfills. Now in sanitary landfills, what you do is, you cover that landfill with a kind of an impermeable material, maybe a kind of a grade of plastic, maybe generally you have stones and clay that is used, so that all the waste that you will dump over here, that gets tackled or that gets isolated only in this region. It does not penetrate or percolate to the lower stretches. So that is the concept of a sanitary landfill. So they are more sanitary and are constructed in a methodical manner to eliminate the problem of leaching, which is experienced in normal landfills. So these are constructed on impermeable soil and lined with impermeable materials such as plastic, clay, and in many of the cases, rocks as well. Major limitation of this method is the costly transportation of municipal solid waste to far away landfill sites. So this is where waste logistic has to be efficient. Okay. MSW here refers to, I will write it here, municipal solid waste. So that is where requirement is of a an efficient waste logistics. Okay, now that is the aspect of sanitary landfills. Now, how do you treat the waste in many of the areas? So, there are various mechanisms by which you can reduce the waste generated or reduce the total amount of waste or treat the waste as well. So, one is by burning the waste, by carrying out combustion in the incineration plants. This is very much going to produce some amount of energy in the process as well. So, when we talk about the incineration plants, so incineration is what? Burning the garbage in massive furnaces at very high temperature. That is incineration. Incineration is a normal process of burning. Now it is it is used to utilize energy, because yesterday also we talked about it, that when you burn the biomass or the garbage, so that will produce some energy. From that energy you can basically convert water into steam, and that steam can be used to run the turbine or a generator, so you can generate electricity out of it. Okay, and when you burn the waste, the overall amount or the quantity of the waste that was there, that will also reduce. The waste which is now left, that will also reduce. So it would be easier to fill the landfill areas, isn't it? So minimize landfill area without energy recovery, that can also be done. So either you produce energy or you ensure that you will be able to dispose of that waste much more efficiently. Now, the products formed in the combustion process include hot gases, it includes N2, CO2, H2O, flue gas, which is a general term given to waste gases, oxygen, and various materials. So, obviously, you need to be able to treat these gases perfectly well before releasing them back into the atmosphere. Okay, you need to be treating the gases well. Now, here, then comes pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is different from incineration. How? So, pyrolysis includes again burning, but only of biological waste, or rather the biodegradable waste, organic waste, that is the carbonaceous waste that you have. So, for example, let's suppose when you talk about it, firewood, coconut, palm trash, wooden waste that you have, corn combs, cashew shell, paddy straw, the dried grasses, etc., all of that, those kind of waste. So you carry out incomplete combustion, right? Not a complete combustion. In incineration, you ensure a kind of a complete combustion. Here, in either the absence of or very limited presence of oxygen, or in the absence of oxygen, you carry out the process of burning. Now that is when you carry out the process of burning, either, so that is going to lead to incomplete combustion. Incomplete combustion means you will have the remnant of the material getting converted into some or the other form of charcoal, and that charcoal can then later be utilized as the input fuel or the input raw material for various industries as well. Okay, so here, for example, when we talk about this pyrolysis, please understand, many of the candidates, on a regular basis they get confused with pyrolysis and incineration. You have to understand that there is a difference. So this brings about incomplete combustion. It is actually this process in the absence of oxygen which leads to it. Incomplete combustion. That incomplete combustion will lead to what? The carbonaceous wastes are partially burnt and that leaves behind charcoal as residue, and this charcoal can be used as fuel for industries. It can be used as a fuel for various different industrial processes as well. So that is the process of pyrolysis. Incineration, complete combustion. Pyrolysis, in a limited supply of oxygen or in the absence. So not all the waste is treated in the process. So you only have firewood, coconut, palm trash. So carbonaceous. So carbon compounds, carbon rich compounds, they are treated like this. Composting is for the biodegradable waste, where you ensure that there is significant amount of degradation. Degradable organic waste is decomposed into humus like substance. Now that is carried out in the presence of oxygen by microorganisms, primarily fungi and bacteria. The final product can be used as a manure. It is rich in carbon and nitrogen. Now this composting, sometimes it is carried out with the help of the worms, earthworms, etc. They also help in the process of degradation and decomposition, as we have studied earlier. So when you make use of worms significantly for the process of composting, that is what is also referred to as vermicompost. Okay. That is what we refer to as the vermicompost, where you make use of the worm. So this is the process of composting, where you will observe that in the presence of moisture, this is something that we have talked about in the first class itself, that for the process of decomposition, what is it that you require? Organic compound, the presence of microorganisms, the availability of moisture, warmer temperature, adequate temperature. Now that leads to decomposition. Now, in the process of decomposition, you will always observe that air is required, water is required, microbes, microorganisms, worms, bacteria, fungi, etc., which are already present in the soil. All of them, they carry out the process of decomposition. Heat is produced, gases are released, gases like methane are released. Okay, they get released, and eventually the compost is generated. This compost can be used as manure to augment the fertility of the soil and form a viable alternative to the chemical fertilizers and the chemical inputs which are being used in the farmland. Okay. Now, vermiculture, this is also what is known as the earthworm farming, where you grow the earthworms in particular, and earthworms are added to the compost. Now, earthworms, what they do is, as they move through the waste, now organic waste, many of the times it tends to secrete significant amount of liquid, and that tends to coalesce together. In general, if you have seen or if you have witnessed organic waste, now maybe the farm waste, maybe your kitchen waste, any of these, when they start getting degraded or decomposed, after a point of time, you will observe that it gets coalesced together. That is where the earthworms, when they move through the entire system, that is when they will provide that vent or that channel through which the air is able to penetrate, and that penetration of air is very much required to carry out the complete degradation of the inner materials as well. So that is when the air is able to penetrate, and that is also the channel through which the heat is allowed to escape. So these earthworms, they carry out that degradation. They will eat through the material, further disintegrating or fragmenting it. So they will carry out the further greater amount of degradation and handling of the organic waste. Okay. Now we come to what is referred to as bioremediation. Now, what is this bioremediation? What is this process about? And what does it do? So, bioremediation, break this term. So it is a kind of a remedy in a biological methodology in simplest of the terms. In the very crude mechanism, we can think about it, providing remedy by biological methods. So what is done? The process, if you take a look at the definition, processes that use mainly microorganisms, plants, or microbial or plant enzyme to detoxify contaminant in the soil or other environment. Now, once this definition is done, put it to the side. Understand, wherever you have lot of waste, lot of, let's say, contamination which has happened, maybe oil contamination, maybe other form of toxins which have contaminated the soil in your locality, how do you treat that? Now, always you won't have the facility of transporting that entire polluted area into some other region and treating it out. So that is where the process of bioremediation comes in. So bioremediation basically works on the simple principle of decomposition. The simple natural principle of decomposition, accelerated rate of decomposition, that is the entire principle on which bioremediation works upon. How? So here, the rate of decomposition is accelerated. Okay. So in this case, rate of decomposition is accelerated. How? That is done by providing in the contaminated area the availability of either moisture, air, or microbes, microorganisms, which can be specially designed, can be either found naturally or can be specially lab grown to handle certain type of toxic. Example, oil zapper. Now, oil zapper will take care of the oil spill. So either you supply moisture, either you supply air, or you supply or introduce microorganisms, or if let's suppose you have to use only the naturally occurring microorganisms, the toxin which is released is not so harmful that natural microorganisms cannot take care of that. So in that case, you supply the vital nutrients which are required for the growth of suitable microorganisms. Okay, supplying vital nutrients vital nutrients essential for promoting growth of specific microbes. So this is done in order to detoxify the contamination which can happen in larger areas. So you have various different mechanisms in which bioremediation is carried out, in which bioremediation is achieved. So let us take a look at the various different mechanisms of them. It is of various different types. All the types basically either they will supply moisture, or they will supply the oxygenated air, or they will supply the specific kind of microbes. So you have bioventing, bioaugmentation, biosparging, and so on. So let us take a look at it. So first of all, bioventing. Now, when you have soil in larger area getting contaminated by a toxin, and that toxin is something which can be treated by the naturally found microbes there itself, for which you don't require any specific lab grown microbe. So that is not such a dangerous toxin out there. So in that case, many of the times what is required is provide the availability of air in the lower reaches of the soil, so that these microbes can start growing. Okay, so here, let's suppose this is the contaminated layer of soil. So you provide oxygen and nutrient also, you push in, so that the microbial growth, the local microbe, the indigenous local microbe, that all also many of the times you have, for example, organic waste over a long period of time, that will release a lot of materials along with certain chemicals that will uh, reach the subsoil level. So how do you treat that? So local microbes will also be able to detoxify that. So for that, you need to provide air, and nutrient for the growth of the microbes. So here, bioventing is a process of stimulating the natural in situ biodegradation of contaminants in soil by providing air or oxygen to the existing soil microorganisms. So no new microorganism will be released here. The existing one are capable to handle this. Okay, but here the problem that arises is, sometimes if, let's suppose, the microbial population, obviously when they get the availability of air through the help of the pipe, vent is what? Vent is a channel, a pipe. So through the vent, you have the availability of oxygen, which is allowed. Then you have the availability of nutrient, which is allowed. Now, in that situation, what happens, what is observed is that sometimes even after the toxin is completely decontaminated, that region is completely decontaminated, the growth of the microbe doesn't stop even after that. The microbial population keeps on increasing even after that. And that means even after the waste has been taken care of, that microbial population will then start working on all the organic matter that it finds in the soil thereby, and it can degrade them as well. So it can have a disadvantage if it simply has got an in a way uncontrolled expansion of population of the microbes, that can have disadvantageous impact in the long run, where it can deny the soil of its fertility by degrading the natural organic material as well. Okay, then you have the bioaugmentation. What is bioaugmentation? Now, in the case of bioaugmentation, for example, you have certain specific toxins which the local microbes of the soil, they won't be able to treat. So in those cases, you deal with the toxins, you treat the toxins by specially lab grown microbes in certain cases, and you introduce the microbial organisms in that region. Okay, so augmentation of microbes and nutrients takes place. So specially designed microbes, specially designed nutrients for them, all of that is introduced in the contaminated area, so that the degradation can happen, the degradation can take place. Okay, now then you have biosparging. This is another methodology of bioremediation itself. So biosparging is what? So that basically means that if you have the ground surface, there you install a pipe going up to the region of the groundwater. So many of the times, even some amount of groundwater gets in a way contaminated, and the soil above it also gets contaminated. So in the region of groundwater, you release high pressured air. Now, what it will do is it will inculcate the or increase the dissolved oxygen quantity, and along with moisture, oxygen will also be provided in the above layers. Along with moisture, oxygen will also be provided in the above layers. So it will carry out the microbial degradation or decomposition in the above layer. So it involves the injection of air under pressure below the water table to increase the groundwater dissolved oxygen concentration and enhance the rate of biological degradation of contaminants by naturally occurring bacteria. So, biosparging and bioventing, you don't introduce any new microorganism. Naturally found microorganisms are utilized. But bio-augmentation, you introduce the kind of microorganism that will tackle the kind of contamination. You have another method where, let's suppose, the contamination has happened in a region, and the contamination is so significant that you cannot carry out the degradation or remediation in that region itself. So what is done is that entire region, the entire soil proportion, all of that contamination, that is dug out, it is spread over, it is dug out, it is carried over to another area, open space, where all that soil, contaminated soil, that is laid over. And in that, in the supply of moisture, water, air availability, and the availability of nutrients, decomposition is carried out. So this is an ex situ process where the contaminated soil is carried to a far over region and then allowed to decompose. So contaminated soil is carried to a far away location, then microbial growth is allowed to happen, and degradation is allowed to happen. Okay, that is the process of land farming. Here, you transport the waste, you shift the waste somewhere else to be tackled somewhere else. Now, then comes composting bioremediation. What do we mean by composting bioremediation? This is just the process of composting that we have seen, where natural decomposition is carried out in the presence of air, moisture, etc. Natural decomposition is allowed, and that basically leads to buildup of manures. That basically converts the material into manures. Now, let us take a look at few of the government's initiatives, acts, and policies. Now, here, let me tell you the latest ones of them, the latest changes in the legislations. That is something which becomes relevant for your examination perspective. Okay, so and here you can have an approach, as few of them have, that okay, if I'm appearing for the exam in 2025, I will not look at any government initiatives till 2025 and then I will take a look into it. But that is a wrong approach. If you have initiated your preparation now, it is an absolute wrong approach. So what you should ideally do is make yourself familiar with the older legislations and the laws which are in place, so that when the newer changes are incorporated, you will be able to not only understand the changes, you will be able to understand the implication of the changes as well. You won't be required to learn those changes anymore, because that is something which you will internalize. So that is where I would suggest to you that keep a track of the older legislations as well, so that the changes which are brought about is something which is understood by you. Okay, so Amongst the legal measures that the government has brought in, the government has brought in various different acts and laws in order to tackle the issue of pollution at various different levels, at the level of the municipality, at the level of the industries, at the level of the biomedical industry, at the level of the plastic waste, be it e-waste. So the government has brought in various different rules, and they have been amended quite frequently as well. So we are concerned with few of them, but before that, or majority of these, they talk about the concept which we refer to as EPR, or the extended producer responsibility. So what is that principle of EPR, or extended producer responsibility? So in simplest of the terms, this principle means that it is the producer of the item, of the material, who is also in a way responsible for the waste which is generated. So producer is also responsible for the waste which is generated. How? Let's suppose you are an individual who is very environment friendly, who is very eco friendly. Now you are walking out on the street, and let's suppose you feel thirsty. You go out to the market, you buy a bottle of water. It is given in a grade of plastic which you cannot recycle, and there in the bottle also it is mentioned that dispose the bottle after use. So there, what you are doing is you are generating plastic waste. Even though you didn't want it, you are generating plastic waste. So that is where, so the responsibility or the onus of that lies where? On the producer who has packaged his material in the plastic item. If that manufacturer would have used a sturdier plastic, a stronger plastic, maybe you would have reused it, recycled it. But because it is a single use plastic, you are bound to throw it away, isn't it? So that is the concept of EPR, where you fix the responsibility of the waste generation on the producer. Okay, so some responsibility of waste generation lies with the producer. So if you have the producer here, let's suppose that producer is going to, let's suppose, manufacture an item that will eventually or immediately it will go to the wholesalers, that will go to the retailers, and from those retailers eventually it will land up in the hands of consumers. That is the entire process, that is the entire pathway which is followed, which is taken. Now here, the consumers, that is the one which will generate the waste. So you are making the producer in a way responsible for the waste generated. Now what that also entails is that the producer has to ensure that the waste which is generated, enough of it is collected, enough of it is treated, and enough of it is disposed of. Right? So that is the concept of producer being made responsible, extended producer responsibility. Now, this EPR, the principle of EPR in India, was for the first time introduced as per the provisions of the e-waste rules itself. And that is where the entire principle of EPR came into existence, e-waste management rules. Because the electronic items, it is the producer of the electronic items, the manufacturer of the electronic items. They know the best how to tackle those electronic waste, etc. So that was the logic behind in implementing or ensuring EPR norms in the e-waste management rules 2011. But then over a period of time, there were significant amount of violations which happened where the EPR norms were not being followed. Industries, they would report something else, that we have not generated this much amount of product. So in a way, they would shy away from their responsibility of fulfilling the EPR norms. That is where the recent changes which have been brought about in the plastic waste management rules and the e-waste management rules, they make the compliance of EPR much more easier, much more utilizable. How? So a concept which has been brought in is that of EPR certificates. EPR certificates which have been made tradable. So what is the concept of tradable? EPR certificates. What is that? So let's consider here, when we talk about it, amongst the producers, let's consider an electronic item manufacturer. Take the case of any of these. For example, let's consider Apple. Now, Apple is the one of those companies, organizations which specializes in manufacturing of electronic item, cutting edge technology, right? Mobile phones, watches, laptops, desktops, etc. That is the specialty of Apple. Now, Apple's specialty is not the waste collection. Apple's specialty is not to understand in Delhi which are the regions where electronic items are going and which are the areas where electronic items are dumped. That is not the specialty of Apple. So Apple has, in a way, has been significantly inefficient in terms of waste collection. Now, the government will give Apple certain target that, let's suppose you have manufactured 100 units. At least ensure the collect back of 40 units, ensure the treatment of 50 units, ensure the disposal of 50 units. So the government will fix a target, but Apple doesn't specialize in that. So what these certificates or tradable EPR certificates do is they work pretty much on the same principle like you see, for example, the principle of carbon credit, etc. So here what happens, let's suppose few of you, after spending some time in the civil services preparation, you understand that eventually we need to utilize time. So we'll open a startup about waste collection and their disposal and treatment, because waste is where the money is. So you have opened a startup. Let's name that company ABC. Now that ABC specializes in waste management. Now, here, let's suppose the target given to Apple, target is, let's suppose, 100 tons, which it is finding it very difficult to collect 100 tons of equipments and thereby carry out the disposal. So that is something which Apple is finding incredibly tough. Meanwhile, the startup ABC that you have opened up, that has got a specialization in understanding where electronic waste is being disposed. You have got a liaising with the local municipality and the municipal corporation to understand that how that waste needs to be collected back. So you have handled 500 tons. Okay. You have handled 500 tons of waste. Now, as a consequence of this, you will be given EPR certificate. You will be known for that or recognized for that. So, ABC will have certificate for 500 tons. Okay. Now, Apple requires, the obligation is that you have to handle 100 tons, but it doesn't have the wherewithal or the capacity to do it. So what Apple will do is Apple will buy certificate for 100 tons. and thereby ABC earns money in return of it. Okay, so here what has happened? In a way, a specific organization which is much more in in a process, if you can think about it, much more efficient in waste collection, much more well oiled in terms of the knowing the entire mechanism of waste collection, treatment, etc. So that particular organization is carrying out the waste collection, and that particular organization will get the certificates which it can trade with the producer, right? The producer can then trade about it also. Here, just like, I'm sure you would have read the portion of economics as well, and in economics I'm sure you would have read about the certificate of deposit, right? Commercial papers, all these things you would have read about, right? Okay, so that, how it is traded. So whosoever holds that commercial paper or certificate of deposit at the end of the day, that is the person who gets the money at the end of the day, isn't it? So let's suppose ABC here is left over with a certificate for 400 tons. Now ABC, what it does, it goes to a particular multilateral or a financing agency, and you can sell it to any particular organization. You can sell the remaining certificates, and that organization will then deal with the producer separately. So that tradable EPR certificate, now what it has brought about is, it has brought about an increased possibility of compliance, where companies like Apple, companies like Samsung, they don't need to go into the market, and they don't need to get involved in the waste disposal and waste collection anymore. They can carry out their processes, and you will have simultaneously very specific industries which are well equipped to handle the waste, who have a specialization in that area. Those industries will come up, startups will come up, that will create jobs, that will bring about a circular economy where you will have a much better utilization of the waste as well. And in a way, they will get financial support from the larger companies based upon the obligations that hold. Okay, so that is basically the entire principle of EPR and the tradable EPR certificates which have been brought in as per the new rules. Okay. Madhur, the work which ABC is doing, the government can also do to make revenue. No, my dear friend. See, always remember this, that when we talk about the waste management, if you have a small region like Singapore, fixing of accountability is easy. You have one organization of the government which will tackle the waste. So you can always ensure efficiency in that regards. But let's suppose a larger country like India, a democratic country like India. Why I say democratic? Because here I don't want you to be giving examples of China. Because in China, if let's suppose you are found to be faltering, immediately you will disappear from the face of planet Earth. Thankfully, that doesn't happen in democratic countries. Now, in a democratic country like India, it might absolutely be possible that the waste collection is not efficient in certain areas, waste disposal is not efficient in certain areas, and that is because the municipalities, they don't have the exact capacity, they don't have the money to carry out the process. Okay, where will the municipalities get that money from? They don't have the money. That is why the vehicles used to transport waste are so very old. That is why the capacity has still not improved. So that is why you need the private sector to come in, and come in big time. Even Singapore, for that matter, has allowed, or has in a way taken the next step in waste management because of private participation. Western economies, you will observe private participation. See, whenever you have private participation, generally that is the time when you have cutting edge technology which is also developed. Government run agencies and the government run businesses, they have a kind of a mediocrity in which they always function. Almost all of them that you observe, they always operate in a kind of a mediocrity. So remember one of the particular sayings, that government has no business to stay in business. So the government should actually And this is one of the good moves where the government is allowing the participation of the private. That is when the investment will come in. With greater investment, you have a greater economic output as well. You have a greater economic participation as well. You have a greater job creation as well. That happens only with the case of investment coming in, with the case of capital getting created, and that is when the demand gets created in the economy and the economy grows. Otherwise, you have the example of where Soviet Union, where the government did everything. Look at what happened to the economic stature of Soviet Union eventually. Okay, so Mona Lisa, ABC will be left with 400 tons of certificate. Yes. Like priority lending certificate, which is tradable. Yes, Kirubaga, that is correct. And then creation of a virtuous cycle. Yes, it's like bringing a third party. True. Even nowadays, municipalities are working on a PPP model with the private sector on waste management. That is true. Government support to ABC companies needed for nearly 100% recycling. But then, no, government can create an ecosystem. After that, the companies have to operate on their own. They have to survive or sink on their own. The government can provide the ecosystem, they can provide the legislation in which they can thrive. But after that, the government support is not required. Then it doesn't solve any purpose. Okay, so that is the case of the tradable EPR certificates. Now here, when we talk about certain norms and rules here, plastic waste management rules 2022, the latest amendment which has been brought in. So what this has done, amongst the multiple things, so understand it in gist. I have everything for you written in the text as well, so that you won't find it difficult at the time of revision, but understand the broader contours of it. What is that amendment about? So basically, the newer rules which have been brought about for plastic waste, they talk about certain aspects. First of all, minimization of the waste, right? Reducing the waste. Now, how do you reduce the waste? By encouraging reuse and recycle. So, the plastic is divided, the plastic waste that is generated, the plastic in itself is categorized into various subclassifications based upon their thickness, based upon their make. So, for example, let's suppose you go out there in the market to buy a laptop, for example, or a TV set, for example. Now, there also you will have styrofoam and other forms of packaging plastic. When you go out to the market, you buy a vegetable. There also you have some form of plastic, but both of them are very different, right? You buy certain containers from the market, that can also be made of plastic, but that will be of a very different component. So you can have very different components or different categories of plastic. Once you ensure the categorization, you can then make it mandatory for reuse recycle in certain categories. So that categorization has been done as per this norm. Secondly, there has been the inculcation of the tradable EPR certificates here, that plastic waste management. So, for example, here earlier I had taken the case of Apple. Similarly, I can take the case of Coca Cola, PepsiCo, any of these. Now, Coca Cola is one of significantly large generators of plastic waste, right? They generate significant amount of plastic waste. Now, they have been escaping scrutiny for a long period of time. All these multinational companies, they pay millions of dollars to people in marketing, people in legal, just so that they can find certain loopholes, how we can save money by ensuring that we don't have to comply to those. So in the Coca-Cola bottles, or in the Pepsi bottles that you buy, now they also have the EPR obligations that they have to fulfill. But many of the times they fulfill it how? Just by printing the reuse recycle and ensuring, or printing it that kindly recycle this. This is for safe consumption, right? So that is where they are trying to escape the system, the obligations. That is where you need to, first of all, the along with the tradable certificates, a norm has been made where the organizations are required to register on an online portal to be developed and monitored by CPCB. Only then will the organizations be allowed to function, And that is when these organizations, they will be in a way, they can be held accountable. Now when you are registering yourself to an online portal, you have to keep a track of the total amount of waste that you are generating, total amount of waste that you are accumulating back. So there's transparency which has been brought in the process as well. Okay, now let us take a look at the various different provisions. So categorization or classification of plastic has been done. Category 1, rigid plastic packaging will be included. Rigid ones, which are used for packaging very certain specific kind of equipments out there. Flexible plastic packaging with single layer of different types of plastic sheets, carry bags, plastic sachet or pouches, all of that is in category 2, category 3, and similarly category 4. This is the categorization of plastic which is done. Now reuse, here comes the important parts. In the case of plastic packaging, reuse of rigid plastic packaging material has been mandated under the guidelines. Okay. Now this will reduce the total amount of waste which is generated by necessitating the reuse of the rigid plastic. Okay. Now, then extended producer responsibility certificates. Now, in this, there is the guideline to allow for sale and purchase of surplus EPR certificates. So that brings in the scope for a third party, the private party, who will generate a lot of certificates. It can sell the certificates to Coca-Cola, some certificates to Pepsi, some certificates to, let's say, another one, Campa. And like that, it can make money. Make money in what? In specializing in waste collection, its treatment, and its proper disposal. Okay. The purpose of it is to set up a market mechanism for plastic waste management, and also ensures investment in the sector. Wherever investment happens, wherever, in whichever sector investment happens, job creation happens, newer tech comes in always. So this will lead to job creation, newer tech also comes in, right? So that means better efficiency. Now, this will also ensure compliance by the industries. Okay. Also ensures compliance. Earlier, compliance was not being made possible. And the companies would simply have the argument that, see, we specialize in the manufacturing of soft drinks, we don't specialize in collecting of garbage. So that is where the kind of arguments that they would put forward. Now everyone will comply. So the larger purpose of EPR is what? That waste should be utilized, the waste should be recycled, and overall that waste that you see, the dump, that should be reduced. So that will be achieved. Along with that, jobs can also be created. So it is a win-win situation. Okay, circular economy, yes. Now, after this, a centralized online portal that will be established by CPCB, opened and operated by CPCB. Now, what it will include is the various different filings, registration, as well as filings of annual returns. By whom? Not only the producers, so also the importers, the brand owners, what is referred to as PBIO. Okay. So importers, brand owners, all of them. So all of them. So for example, let's suppose Apple till recently did not manufacture its phones in India. So it would basically be importing them. So the importers, the resellers, they also have to be made accountable for that, isn't it? Otherwise, what the companies would do is, once they would find out that in this country the producers are being made to pay this much amount of charge, they would set up their manufacturing base somewhere else, and they would simply export to India. So that is why all of them are covered under this. Now, this is also the basic DNA of the e-waste management rules, the changes which have been brought about. That also follows the lines of the plastic waste rules, or the newer rules which have been brought about. Now, e-waste management rules, so includes CFLs, the various different lamps. Now, new rules have also brought in the usage, or the solar photovoltaic cells. They have also been brought under e-waste, right? So generally here you have electrical and electronic equipment. Both of them are included in this. Okay, electrical and electronic equipment. So that is EEE, what it is referred to as. Now, they bring producers under the ambit of EPR together with the targets. Producers have been made accountable for the e-waste collection and the exchange as well. Other additional stakeholders mean manufacturers, the dealers. Now, here, when you think about dealers, how is it that the dealers are? So, that entire recollection mechanism, ideally, if the company in itself is carrying it out, let's suppose the company is not relying on a third party, so the company will have to take the help of that entire route, isn't it? The company, from the consumers, it has to ensure that the retailers get that waste, they collect that waste, the retailers, they give that to the wholesalers, and then eventually the producer gets that. In fact, what I don't know if you recall this or not. You had this event few years back. You had this during the summertime. You had the company Coca-Cola, which came up with a kind of a scheme that bring us the older bottle. We will give you 1 rupee discount for the newer bottle of cold drinks or the soft drinks that you will buy. This all is a mechanism of inducing EPR. And the older bottles, in that case, would you carry out to the production plant of Coca-Cola, or would you send it in a package addressed to the chairperson of Coca-Cola? No, you would basically go to the nearby retailer. The retailer would collect all these, give it to the wholesaler. So that is how the entire chain functions. Hence, the dealers, all of them, the refurbishers, all of them, they have been made responsible. Now, the new EPR norms, they basically have also, in a way, singled out the regions such as airports, hotels, places of mass public visit. All these places, they also generate the waste in very large quantity. Electronic waste is generated in very large quantity when you talk about airports, when you talk about, let's suppose, railway stations, hotel business. E-waste is generated in humongous quantity. Now, all the manufacturer, producer, refurbisher, and recycler, here, they are required to be registered on a portal developed by CPCB, just like in the case of the plastic waste norm. So they are required to register. In case you want to carry out the business, you have to register on the portal developed by CPCB. No entity shall carry out any business without registration, or there shall be no dealing with the unregistered entity, unless and until you want to deal with in the black market economy or in the kind of black money, there you can. But again, with the development of AI and machine learning being used by the Central Board of Direct Taxes now, it is very, very difficult to, it has become much more difficult to evade taxes. With the growing amount of such scrutiny in the coming years, the hope is that evading taxes like this and evading the norms like this, evading the legal compliance like this, will almost become impossible. Now, here, producers of notified electronic and electrical equipment have been given annual e-waste recycling targets based upon the generation of e-waste from their previously sold electrical equipment, or based upon the sales of electrical equipment, as the case may be. In case you are producer, in case you are dealer, in case you are manufacturer, this will change. Target may be made stable for 2 years. Okay, and then is increased, or incrementally it is changed. So the target of accumulation of that waste, the collection of that waste. So 60% target for the year 23 to 25, in the sense that 60% of the total sales that you have carried out for the electronic and electrical equipment, 60% of that you ensure that from the year 23 to 25 you collect that back. Then for the next 2 years it will be aggravated to 70%, then 80%. Okay, and that is how eventually the situation is foreseen, where the companies will be made accountable for all the waste that is generated by them. So this is basically a mechanism to induce. So this is to induce a fixed accountability. Earlier, under EPR, under the older EPR norms, you did not have a designated target. Now that designated target has been set based upon the sales carried out. Okay, the sales which are generated. Now, management of solar photovoltaic modules or panels have also been added in the new rules. Okay, then the quantity which is recycled is computed on the basis of the end product that is generated, not that capacitor also I have manufactured, etc., etc. So you cannot circumvent the system. Now, provision and the transaction of EPR certificate has been introduced. Okay, verification and audit has been introduced. Okay, environment compensation has been introduced significantly for the first time. Now these important small provisions that you see, these can form a question for your prelims. So that is where you have to be aware of that and you have to take note of that. Okay, so for example, environmental compensation, etc. Now, here, under the e-waste management rules, provision for reduction of hazardous substances in the process of manufacturing of equipment has been provided. Right? So the producers, they have also been in a way nudged to reduce the amount of hazardous materials. So it mandates that every producer of electronic and electrical equipment and their components shall ensure that their products do not contain the harmful components, such as the products do not contain harmful components such as lead, mercury, and other hazardous substances beyond the prescribed concentration amount. That is basically the aspect of this e-waste management. Okay, so they also provide for recognition, registration. Now this is also important. This portion is also important, because recall, in the previous slide we had studied that how e-waste in majority of the part of the country is actually dealt in the informal sector. Now when it is dealt with in the informal sector, brings about inefficiency, brings about greater pollution as well, and the health of the workers also, they are taken for a spin. Right, because obviously safety equipment, etc., that is a luxury which the workers do not follow. So then what is the solution there? So that has been devised by the new rules. So skill upgradation for the workers, monitoring and ensuring safety and health, that has been brought about. That brings the human angle to this particular new rule or the new law. Okay, I hope this entire trend has been understood. You might forget one or two snippets here and there. I don't want you to rote learn or rectify this as of now. As of now, I just want you to look at the larger picture, that what these laws are trying to achieve. If you try to learn this as of now, immediately you will fail there. So observe the larger picture, then get into the nitty gritties. It will be much easier to recall and revise as well. Okay. Now, then there was also the solid waste management rule of 2016. which basically cared or was concerned with the handling of the municipal solid waste in chief. That was the key point of concern. Other waste as well, but in chief, in totality, the municipal solid waste was targeted under this. Now, here, this was also considered to be landmark. This was a question which was directly asked in the examination. In the mains examination, there was a direct question that what are the key, why is it that, or what are the key provisions of the Solid Waste Management Rule 2016? How is it supposed to bring about changes and so on? So this was considered to be landmark because for the first time, it put many of the things which we think about as common sense out on the paper, out on the norm. For example, it made it mandatory to bring about segregation of the waste at source. Now, still today in our country, now this met a lot of opposition. Citizens in larger and activists also in many parts of the country, they opposed this norm like anything. Open up any of the newspaper editorials of 2016, even today, you will find a host of criticism being met out at certain arguments. And I'll let you know the arguments as well. Segregation at source. Many of the citizenry, they did not, they still don't follow the segregation at source. Other than few of the residential societies, that too in tier 1, tier 2 cities only, even not in the entirety of the tier 1 tier 2 cities, only in certain societies it has been mandated that you have to segregate the waste at source, otherwise there will be a fine imposed. But still a large bulk of our country, first of all, if they dispose garbage at their home, they will have a common disposal, a common bucket, etc. In a plastic, they will basically wind it all up, be it the solid waste, be it the uh, kitchen waste, be it the inorganic waste, batteries, etc. All of that in the same plastic, it is thrown away. Now, what it does, the portion of segregation becomes much more difficult by the time it reaches the collection center. So that is why segregation at source was made responsible. Collection and disposal of sanitary waste, collect back scheme for packaging waste in a way to induce recycling of the products. Then another one which induced a lot of protest and hilariously slow, so, and that was the user fees for collection, right? That the government tried to basically convey to the citizens that look, the people who are coming to your house collecting the garbage and then disposing it off, that is a service that we are providing, and for that service you need to pay. Now you can think or you can imagine the reaction that the people gave. In general in our country, that is the kind of mindset that first of all I'll give you my garbage, the precious garbage that is generated from such a precious house like myself, and such an auspicious house like myself, which is so very pure. So that garbage I am giving it to you, and on top of that you are requiring money as well. You should be telling me thank you that I have given you the my garbage. Your life is changed now, and now you are asking for money. So that brought about immediate non-cooperation on the side of large societies, on the large number of people, that how come you are charging now. Please understand, and for any of the government services, can you ever imagine that the government will charge you 5,000, 7,000 bucks for that? No. It was somewhere to the tune of 2 rupees, 5 rupees to 10 rupees on a daily basis for the collection of the garbage. Now, what that has brought about, surprisingly, I'm sure you would have observed it in your surrounding as well. When the municipality comes to collect the garbage, people say that we don't have garbage. No, we don't have garbage, so we won't give you money. Go collect somewhere else. Slowly, what they do is that in the municipal van, they throw the garbage away when nobody is looking, or they simply dump the garbage on the side of the road. That now it is a task of the government. Who were they to ask me about the money for my own garbage? Now they will have to spend money collecting my garbage from the road. So that is where, as citizens, we can say safely so that we have failed ourselves. The same people, the same individuals, you and me, when we will go to Singapore, when we go to United States, when we go to Canada, we follow the norm, we follow the law. We don't litter around, we don't throw garbage here and there. But when we are in India, we think it is a birthright. This is the reason why we gained independence, to be able to pollute anywhere and everywhere. So we must. This is what differentiates the societies from one another. If you try doing the same thing in Singapore, they will put you in jail, charge you with such amount of crime. They will put you or impose you a kind of a fine that might be 3 times to 10 times your annual income. Think about it, that for a wrongful disposal of garbage, if you are in India, if somebody is put into jail unless and until they pay 5 lakh rupees, will anybody throw garbage? No. Or what they will do, they will in a way throw garbage and run away. So compliance is also lacking in that case. So that is where, as a society, we need to improve, and for that, at an individual level, at the level of the family, we need to show the change. Okay. Now, then, waste processing and treatment and promoting use of compost, so that there's an alternative to the chemical farming. There is organic farming which is allowed, and promotion of waste to energy. These were the key norms and the key regulations and the key points of the solid waste management rule 2016. Okay. Now, after this, we will come to the aspect of noise pollution and certain international conventions. We'll do that tomorrow. We'll end the session here itself today. Okay. And we'll take a few of them. Yes, Anshu, please go ahead. Azhar, I understood the biogeochemical cycle, but sulfur cycle could not be understood. So, sulfur cycle basically, Azhar, is see, where is the sulfur produced from? So, burning of fossil fuel, then volcanic eruption. In all these ways, sulfur is produced. Microorganisms from the oceans, all of them, they produce that sulfur, right? So that sulfur then is returned to the ground. How? By reaction with the various different compounds. You have sulfates which are created, you have acid rain, you have dry deposit, wet deposit, etc. All of them, they return the sulfur to the ground. Biological processes also utilize sulfur. So that is how the cycle is completed. Madhur, did you check your mail? Did you find the mail which was sent? Anshu, I'll take a look into it. Himanshu, is it so? Under what name did you say? See, many of you, you have a different name here, and the mail that you send it under different names. So, in case you are using a different mail ID, in the subject itself, write that you have a doubt, and in the body, do mention your name, guys. Okay, and. Deepika, can localized treatment of waste be a probable solution for the difficulties in transportation? But then that will be a major obstacle in the case of large generation areas such as the metropolitan, the central business district of those. So, in the suburbs and in the smaller towns, yes, that can be done. That should be done, because those are also the areas which are significantly polluted. There also waste management. So, there you can provide this as a meaningful solution, but not in the large areas. Okay. And waste management depends on government too. Okay, so political statement, I'll refrain from making any political statements, Neelata. So I'm sorry for that. So let's not go into that area. And then, okay. Kirubagar, that is what I said. Burning of the accumulated waste is the one which is generating all that fumes and all that air pollutant. And the garbage problem is very crucial, because people are showing the garbage not in garbage vehicle, rather into the bridge and areas of it. Yes, that is true. Uh, the district collector, and again, and some steps taken, but no changes do happen. That is because the entire machinery who is involved in collection, They are the ones who are not, see, for them the incentive to carry out their jobs is not always on track. In the sense, many of the municipalities, they have not paid the people working in the waste collection department for a long period of time, right? So, and see, unless, think about the normal psyche of an individual. Take the case of your metro stations and take the case of your airports and compare it with the railway stations and the bus stations. In the metro stations and the airports, the same people who travel through the railways, they will throw the material of food or half-eaten food packets randomly in the railway station, because all around them they see the garbage, but they will never do so in the metro station. Why? Because it is clean. So once an area is cleaner, look at the region of Indore, look at Gwalior, look at Mysore. Once you build up a good practice, then that is to be continued. People like to have their areas cleaner. For that, if they see that somewhere there's a mound of garbage, they will throw their garbage on top of it as well. If they don't see any place where the garbage is kept, they will take that extra step to at least hide their garbage where they have thrown and so on. Okay. Vikash, what if landfills after millions of years give petrol and gas? That will be a miracle, my dear friend, if the landfills start giving out petroleum and gas after millions of years, because petroleum and gas, they are created by the decomposition of the marine organisms over millions of years. And the marine organisms, there the carbonification happen. In the landfill, we don't have any of such thing. Hence, it won't be created. Okay, Anshu, I'll take a look. And fly ash ponds. Yes, Aniket. Fly ash ponds basically are the regions where you have the collection of all that fly ash from the various different portions of the power plant. All of that is washed off and is collected in the fly ash ponds. That is what is carried out. Okay, so that will be all from my side here today, guys. We'll meet again tomorrow for the final time this week, and that is where we will talk about climate change as well. So till that point of time, do relax, take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you. Hariom, what was your doubt? We'll take it up tomorrow, Hariom, the AQI. Okay, remind me tomorrow.